Along the streets of Zhonghai City, where the day had blossomed in full splendor and the city bustle was growing with each passing minute. In one of the cafes, a girl with glasses and a beautiful dress was sitting, asking a guy if he had a car. The young guy, attractive and confident, replied that he didn't have a car. Doubts overcame the girl, and she asked the guy again if he had real estate, and he answered negatively. The beauty's gaze was filled with doubts, and if the guy has nothing, how can he arrange blind dates? Standing up, she declared that the guy was a loser because she was above him, being a senior employee, and the lost time was wasted. The guy dared to ask why she valued herself so highly, and in response he met her gaze. The dark-haired girl became angry, demanding an explanation, but the guy remained calm. Suddenly the guy noticed that the girl's bag was only a high-quality fake, and her Prada, bought on eBay with free shipping, and her cheap makeup destroyed the illusions. The Prada that the beauty wore so proudly turned out to be an online purchase with free shipping, and her makeup looked cheap and low quality. The girl, who claimed to be a senior employee, turned out to be just a registrar, and the guy realized that something had gone wrong, causing the beauty's anger. The guy, looking at her face, realized that the girl, despite the extensive makeup, did not escape her shortcomings. The girl was overcome with emotion and began to scream and insult the guy, attracting the attention of the waiter. After the scandal, the beauty left, leaving the guy alone with his disappointment. Looking at the ring on his hand, the guy remembered past moments of his life. He remembered how the girl returned his ring, a symbol of a family heirloom, before suggesting that they break up. Realizing that he couldn't offer the girl the life she wanted, the guy squeezed the ring in his hand. Feeling the pain of cutting his hand on the ring, the guy felt like a real loser. The ring glowed a bright red when it touched the blood. The eye depicted on it seemed to be looking at him. The boy was amazed and wondered why the ring glowed when his blood came into contact with it. The young man's blood began to be absorbed by the family heirloom, and he became frightened when he saw it. When the glow of the ring stopped, the protagonist felt tired and fell unconscious on the table. Waking up, the main character looked around in confusion, not understanding why he lost consciousness. He noticed that the ring was missing and began looking for it, but to no avail. When he asked the waiters if they had seen his ring or if someone had taken it when he passed out, the guy only received horrified looks. The waiters began to discuss among themselves and came up with a plan to avoid problems. They kicked the guy out of the cafe. One of the waiters threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. Shocked by such treatment, the young man realized that the waiters simply did not want trouble, but did not even pay for the order. Walking down the street, the guy was deeply upset by what had happened, but suddenly he heard screams that attracted the attention of passers-by. It turned out to be an advertisement for the National Lottery, and the protagonist stopped to examine it. After listening to advice that if you are unlucky in a relationship, you can lose in gambling, the main character decided to try his luck. He approached a man selling lottery tickets and decided to buy one. The guy noticed hidden inscriptions on the ticket and couldn't understand how this was possible. Trying to solve the riddle, he rubbed his hands over his eyes, thinking it was just fatigue. When his eyes cleared, he saw that his ticket was a winner, and it shocked him. As he thought about it, the boy realized that the ring gave him X-ray vision, and thus he would become rich. The seller, irritated by his hesitation, ordered him to either buy a ticket or leave. Smiling, the guy took 3 tickets and bought them. The seller suggested that he take just one and leave, reminding him that this was not a supermarket, irritating the guy. The guy thought the man's service was terrible and he deserved a lesson. The guy attracted the attention of those around him by proclaiming that he had won $10,000 in the lottery. People discussed his luck, thinking that the ticket could only contain washing powder. The seller doubted the veracity of the winnings and asked to check the ticket. The guy handed him the ticket, but the man immediately claimed that it was a fake. He was indignant, claiming that he had just bought the ticket and did not understand why he was being accused. The salesman brushed aside his objections, claiming that he knew all the tricks from following the news. The protagonist demanded proof, arguing that if it was a fake, then why didn't he tear up the ticket? The man said that the most important proof was himself denying the facts and put the ticket in his pocket. The outraged stranger threatened to sue the boy for slander if he did not stop making accusations. The guy crossed his arms, claiming that if a man said so, then he shouldn't blame him. He handed the seller $100 and explained that he would buy the tickets to hand out to random passersby. Approaching a group of people, he invited them to witness how he would select tickets right in front of them and distribute the winnings. The strangers tried to persuade the guy to take his money back, saying that such money is earned through hard work. But the guy insisted on his own, demanding trust in his plan. This approach, unusual for a salesman, angered him a little. People in the crowd picked up the tickets and began to scratch them, discovering that they had won large sums. The guy demanded that the seller pay in front of the crowd. The seller was shocked that everyone had won and did not want to pay in front of the crowd. The crowd began to riot, suspecting that they were being deceived. Some of them began to act more aggressively, demanding money from the seller. After a small scuffle, one of them grabbed the money from the seller and returned to the guy, claiming that it was his ticket. They decided not to leave the guy without winnings because he made them rich. The main character continued his journey through the city streets, realizing that this was only the beginning. He realized that his abilities opened up new possibilities, including improving his relationships with the opposite sex. However, using his abilities began to cause him physical discomfort. Eye problems and nosebleeds developed, forcing him to limit their use. Despite this, he was excited about the new opportunity to work in a jewelry store. Working in this store seemed like a great opportunity to him. When he entered the store, a disgruntled man called him over. The man was annoyed that the guy came so late, they had little time to do anything. The boss handed the boy a suitcase and told him to go with it to the auction of rough stones. In a low voice, he warned the boy that Miss Zhao, the representative's daughter, would be present at the auction and asked him to behave decently and keep his mouth shut. The young man smiled, feeling nervous and excited, knowing that this was his chance to make an impression. The dark-haired man reminded him to follow his instructions, to which the boy replied that he understood, thinking that he just needed to keep quiet. The man, putting his hands in his pockets, warned the boy that any mistake would result in his immediate dismissal. The guy in the suit looked at his boss, deciding to show what he was capable of. They arrived at an auction of rough diamonds, and the guy was surprised by the scale of the event. The boss was surprised that the boy knew about this place, reminding him to watch himself and not say stupid things in front of Zhao. The guy asked the boss who Zhao was and why he thought the guy would look at her. The scene moves to the hall where the guy was sitting with a cup of coffee, watching what was happening. In front of him sat a beautiful white-haired girl reading something. She looked very graceful. The boy walked up to her and apologized for being late to Ms. Zhao and Elder Qi. Zhao was surprised by the guy's behavior and asked what happened to him, as he continued to look at her, expressing his respect. The guy in the suit responded that he didn't mean to hurt her feelings, claiming that she looked unique and that it was a compliment. The girl stood up and demanded that the guy be fired for trying to flirt with her. The guy replied that he would take back his words, calling her ugly not on the outside, but on the inside. Zhao pointed at him and demanded his dismissal, and the boss tried to calm her down. The guy said that her bad character would cause her to age and fade. The boss approached the guy and warned him about the consequences of his words, demanding that he not offend customers anymore. The boy responded by telling his boss that it was not his turn to speak. The boss was shocked by the guy's words and warned that they would talk about it again after the auction was over. The man walked up to the suitcase and started to open it, suspecting that Yi Qiu had stolen something from the company and decided to check it out. When the suitcase was opened, Everyone was shocked to see a broken blue and white porcelain bowl from the Yuan dynasty. This cup was very rare and valuable, and no one could understand how this could happen. The boss asked Ichio if he could pay for the damage caused by the broken bowl. Elder Chi expressed his indignation, calling the breaking of such a valuable cup a disgrace. The boss reproached the boy, reminding him that he had warned him all the way and now believed that he had broken the cup on purpose. Zhao suggested calling the police and sending the boy to jail if he couldn't pay for the damages. Ichio couldn't understand how this could happen since he was holding the suitcase in his hands and didn't give it to anyone. Suddenly, the protagonist activated his ability and saw a man doing something with a bowl. His head began to hurt, and he couldn't determine whether this was real or just an illusion. Trying to understand what was happening, the boy activated his ability again, despite the pain in his head. He saw the boss accidentally drop and break the bowl, feeling fear. The guy wondered if his gaze was capable of seeing the past, and realized that they were trying to set him up. The girl demanded that the guy be detained while he stood there, stunned with fear, and the boss agreed to this. Ichio suspected that the cup might be fake. Zhao expressed her dissatisfaction, claiming that the protagonist has no brains if he does not understand the value of the cup. The man grabbed Ichio and warned him of the consequences if he doubted Elder Chi's professionalism. The protagonist was ready to argue with the boss, claiming that the cup was a fake. The dark-haired man expressed his willingness to argue with Ichio, stating that if the cup turned out to be real, then the boy would have to apologize to everyone. One young guy asked a question, and if it turns out that he was right, what will happen to him for it? The boss answered, and I doubt that he can be right. And if, for example, the main character proves the opposite, I will be the first to admit that he is right. Elder Chi began to examine the porcelain and noticed something suspicious in the contents of the suitcase. Taking a piece of porcelain in his hands, he noticed that something was wrong with it. This object aroused suspicion. The girl and the man were shocked by Elder Chi's words. The old man continued, stating that this piece of porcelain appeared to be replaced. It was not the one he had tested. Zhao asked the man what happened to the porcelain bowl that was in their store's warehouse. The man began to get nervous and stuttered, saying that he himself did not know what was happening. Pointing at the protagonist, he said that the guy was to blame for this. Ichio had replaced something. Ichio countered, claiming that the suitcase was under the control of a man, and the boss had long since embarrassed himself in front of everyone. The protagonist told Li Chao that he was the only one who had access to the suitcase, and he felt that it was the boss who replaced the cup. The beauty called the guards to arrest Li Chao for his crimes. The guards quickly arrived, ready to carry out the order, but the protagonist stopped them. The man had to keep his promise and kneel before the young man. The man was unwilling to do so, and the boy turned to Zhao, pointing to him as her manager who was incapable of keeping his word, and suggested sending people to the warehouse to check the original of the bowl. The green-eyed girl took the phone and decided to listen to the main character's advice. Elder Chi said that it was a shame for a man to kneel, but he had to keep his word, and Li Chao had lost the bet, so he had to do it in front of Ichio. Li Chao listened to the wise elder and knelt down, apologizing for his actions. The old man asked the young man how he determined that the porcelain was fake. Not every expert could do it so quickly. Ichio replied that he believed that Mr. Chi was experienced in this matter, and that the porcelain was newly made, which was evident from its defects. Smiling, the elder was pleased to see such an intelligent and polite young man. The meeting was about to start, and it was time for them to leave, and Elder Chi had to deal with the porcelain issue after the meeting. The girl ordered her guards to hand Li Chao over to the police for slander and unacceptable actions. The old man raised his hand and asked Zhao not to rush. She should not act hastily. She was interested in Ichio and wanted the boy to go with them. He wanted to see his skills. The girl agreed with Mr. Chi and ordered her guards to take Li Chao under surveillance. After that, they went to the auction, and the protagonist thought, and Mr. Chi is very experienced, and his ability to recognize fakes is respectable. The protagonist noticed that Elder Chi stopped to look at the stone and did not understand why he was looking at it like that. Ichio approached the old man, and they examined the stone together. Even Mr. Chi hesitated, seeing that they were trying to sell it at an inflated price. The young man looked around and realized that this was his chance to help Elder Chi. The main character saw a precious stone inside the stone. Ichio was delighted and declared that it was a magnificent stone that he would like to purchase. The old man waved his hand and said that it was better to look for better quality material. The stone was not worth that kind of money. People began to discuss among themselves and thank Elder Chi for his advice. Otherwise, they might have made a mistake in purchasing. Elder Chi heard the protagonist offer to buy the stone for $10,000 and smiled. Zhao said that old man Chi had taken a good look at the stone and it could be sold, but not for a high price, and she didn't want anyone to waste money. The protagonist explained that he had recently won the lottery and wanted to try his luck with this stone. Old man Chi praised him, saying that the boy was well versed in stones. The young man smiled and told the elder that he just wanted to see what would happen. The salesman interrupted their conversation, saying that the stone was worth exactly $10,000 and offered Ichio to take his check, and he also offered to help the protagonist cut the stone for free. The girl suggested checking on Li Chao, to which Elder Chi replied that there was no need to rush. He was interested in seeing what would come out of the stone. Zhao crossed her arms and declared that nothing good would come out of this stone. The guy would just waste his money. The young man objected, asking what if the value of the material justified the purchase of the stone. The beauty replied that if he made money on this stone, she would apologize to him, but if Ichio suffered losses, the guy would have to apologize to her, and the main character agreed to these conditions. The seller was about to start cutting the stone, but the young man waved his hand and stopped him. The seller was puzzled as to why the guy had stopped him and warned him that if Ichio had changed his mind about buying the stone, it was too late and he wouldn't be able to get his money back. The protagonist assured that he had not changed his mind, and Ichio picked up a marker to show the seller where to cut the stone. Ichio began to draw lines on the stone, indicating where to cut. A young guy with purple hair began to saw the stone along the main character's marks. Zhao didn't believe there was anything special about this stone, but she was still interested in what would happen. When the stone was cut, the people saw something blue inside, and one of them thought that if he knew this, he would buy the stone. Old man Chi was shocked by what was found in the stone and could not utter a word. When the stone was completely sawn, people couldn't believe their eyes. They had never even dreamed of such a thing. The protagonist took the stone in his hands, and Elder Chi said that it was a piece of topaz, very rare. Elder Chi wondered how the boy knew what was inside the stone, but Ichio was able to determine exactly where the valuable stones were. Someone from the crowd shouted that he was ready to buy the stone for $500,000, and then another offered $800,000, and then someone offered $1,200,000. The old man approached Ichio and said that he was willing to buy the stone for $1.5 million and pay him extra for the precision of the cutting. The young man smiled and offered to sell the stone to Elder Chi at the market price of 1 million yuan, since it was thanks to the old man that he was here. Ichio thought about it, and the old man was smart and noticed his talent, but the boy understood his trick and was not going to fall for it. Elder Chi looked at the guy and thought that he was a good guy, not arrogant and very honest, and he had a great future ahead of him. The boy approached Zhao and noticed that the price of the stone had increased hundreds of times after the discovery of its value, so it was time to apologize. The girl became embarrassed, looked away, and apologized to the main character. The main character replied that her apology did not make him particularly happy, but he would accept it and let the beauty understand that she should not underestimate him, otherwise it would only get worse. The young man hugged the stone and thought about how his parents would now live a rich and carefree life. A strange man was watching them, but he didn't want anyone to see him. They went to another room to look at other stones, and the old man wanted to test the boy's abilities. The old man asked him how he liked the stone, and the boy replied that he didn't know. It was too much of a risk. Elder Chi pointed to another stone with a green tint and asked how he liked this one, and the protagonist replied that it was just a green thin layer, and the price was set too high. Chi thought about it, realizing that Yi Chio was trying to avoid discussing it with him in order to hide his true experience. Suddenly, the mobile phone rang, and the protagonist took it out of his pocket to see who was calling. Yi Chio was told that his grandfather was in the hospital, and the boy became scared and said that he would come right away. The protagonist announced that he had to visit his grandfather, and if Zhao was worried about him, he should send bodyguards after him. As the girl was about to answer, Elder Chi waved his hand, stopping her. The older man smiled and said that he did not consider the boy involved in the recent incident with the porcelain bowl, so he let him go. Elder Chi picked up the phone and called Feng to take his friend to the first hospital. It was very urgent. The young man thanked Mr. Chi for his help. Yi Chio ran and asked the old man to buy the stone with the number 264. Although it was expensive, it was worth the money. The beauty looked at Mr. Chi and asked why he was so protective of the guy, since he was just lucky. The old man explained that the girl needed to think more with her head and not allow first impressions to cloud her mind. He also noted that this young guy knew more about stones than he did, and that is why he respected him. They urgently needed to purchase the very stone that the main character recommended, otherwise it could be bought out by other buyers. A few minutes later, they purchased a stone, inside which they found a precious stone called Horsetooth. Elder Chi was surprised, and although he came out on top, the earnings were not that great, and the guy was able to identify even such a complex stone as profitable. He turned to Zhao and said that the protagonist had incredible talent. What would she say now? Zhao was embarrassed and admitted that she had overdone it with her emotions and now knew how to behave. Chi closed his eyes and said that if they accepted this young man, they would have peace. The action moves to the hospital, where the main character has already been brought by car. The young man got out of the car and thanked the driver for the ride to the hospital. Just as he was about to enter the hospital, he heard a very familiar voice calling his name. Yi Chio turned around and saw his uncle, aunt, brother's wife, and his brother himself. Yi Wenwei's cousin told the boy that he had arrived in a very expensive car. Zhang Fang explained that the car was rented because Yi Chio used to ride a motorcycle and asked why he decided to do this. His uncle came up to him and said that the boy was spending money on things they couldn't afford and that it would cause problems. And he said that even his brother's income was only 20,000 yuan, and even he didn't dare to rent luxury cars. The young man looked at them and told them to look at themselves first and then criticize others. The aunt replied that they were doing everything for him so that he would get the best, and yet he ignored their words and went to the hospital. The boy approached his grandfather and took him by the hand, very worried about his health and hoping to save him. The uncle said that his recovery would require a lot of money, which the family did not have. The protagonist's father explained that a large sum of money is required at the initial stage, but then it will become easier. Aunt Huang Yen added that a heart transplant is needed, which costs more than 1,000,000 yuan, as well as funds for post-operative treatment and medication. The man approached his brother and said that their father had raised them both, and now they needed to save him. Aunt Yi Yizhuan and Uncle Yi Yizianjin came to them and said that they didn't have that much money either. Their families were very poor, and they doubted that Grandpa would survive the operation. Uncle Izzy and Go hasn't paid off the mortgage yet, and their son has a good income, but the mortgage is too expensive, and they don't have any money either. The protagonist's father stated that this was their father, and they needed to find a way to save him without leaving him to his fate. The whole family began to blame the protagonist's father for the fact that Grandpa got sick, although they sent him money so that Guoqing could take care of him. The last time they visited him at home, they saw that their father was wiping the table himself, and at that age he should not be taking on such a burden, and they assumed that he was tired of his behavior, and fell ill. The protagonist got angry and shouted at them to stop arguing, and he couldn't understand how they could quarrel when their grandfather was dying and blame each other. Uncle Iziangwo said that how dare he talk to his elders, whereas his upbringing, and that Ichio has no right to blame them, and he says caring words, but in reality, he is only wasting money. Ichio told him to shut up and told his father that he would take care of the surgery expenses himself. He had the money. Everyone was surprised that the guy had money for such an expensive operation. The cousin said that if Ichio could find that kind of money, he would apologize to him on his knees, and the blonde didn't believe that the guy had money, so she thought he was lying. The protagonist said that he said it himself, and if he can prove that he has money, then his brother must fulfill his promise. Zhang Fong started to take out a portable cash register from her bag and said that she could check if the guy was afraid of embarrassing himself. The young man took out his credit card and replied that he should take out his terminal. Soon his dear brother would be kneeling before him. The guy put his card to the cash register, and the amount that was on his card appeared on it, and the girl was shocked by what she saw. A young boy asked his brother if he would kneel before him, but the brother replied that he was older than the main character and he should act like an adult. Ichio said that a person who doesn't keep his promises is not worthy of being called a man, and he still has the nerve to accuse the protagonist of childish behavior. The relatives were shocked by Ichio's words, and the aunt began to complain that Guoqing had raised his son poorly. The father approached his son and asked him whether he had earned the money himself or whether the boy had stolen it. The main character replied that it was his money, and with its help they would cure the grandfather and save his life. Guoqing approached his relatives and asked whether they would raise funds for treatment or not. The uncle replied that he would like to help, but he had no money, and the man with glasses did not have any either. Ichio's father told his son that they would pay for the treatment, but they needed to hurry, and the protagonist agreed with him. Suddenly, a very attractive girl entered the room and apologized for disturbing us. Yi Wenhui recognized the girl and was impressed by her, and the boy asked why Miss Su had come see them. The beauty did not recognize the guy and asked who he was. He replied that she was a noble person and it would be strange if she knew him, and the cousin introduced himself, saying that they worked with Mr. Zhang at the Wang advertising agency. Su sighed, closed her eyes, and remembered the guy from Wang's company. She looked at the people present and asked which one of them was Ichio. Yi Wenhui approached her and said that his brother had done something wrong again, and if she wanted to punish him, they would support her. The girl ignored Yi Wenhui's words and turned to the protagonist, greeting him and introducing herself, and Su Qingwei was Mr. Chi's assistant. The protagonist asked the girl why Mr. Chi sent her to him, and the girl replied that he knew about Yi Chio's grandfather's illness and sent her to find out how they could help. Su Qingwei added that she had already made arrangements with the hospital's chief doctor to provide the best specialist to treat their grandfather, and their company would pay for all the expenses. Relatives watched their conversation and were shocked, not understanding what was happening. Yi Chio smiled and told the girl to convey his gratitude to Mr. Zhao, but they didn't need to bear the cost of Grandpa's treatment. He had the money. The beauty agreed with the guy and suggested that he keep her business card just in case he had any problems. He could call her, and she would help with any question. The young man was very pleased with such attention and thanked Su Qingwei. The girl replied that the guy was a very valuable guest for them, and Zhao wanted to come himself, but he had urgent business at the company, so he sent her, and Xiao wanted to invite them all to dinner. Su Qingwei apologized and decided to leave so as not to interfere anymore. The protagonist thought about how much Zhao's behavior had changed and came to the conclusion that it was not a coincidence. He realized that Zhao had skillfully shown flexibility in this situation, which caused admiration in him. The father asked his son what happened, and the boy replied that Hung Fu's company appreciated his abilities and began to try to please him, so their boss even brought him in his car. Guoqing smiled and asked why his son hadn't told him about this before, and the father was very proud of his son, knowing that he was the best of all. Yichio replied that his father had always taught him to be humble and not to boast about his achievements. He added that there are people who achieve some minimal success and start talking loudly about it, even among relatives, and the brother and his wife felt ashamed of such behavior. Aunt smiled and said that it was just a misunderstanding because they were a family and should support each other. The guy was indignant, saying that his grandfather had worked all his life, even taking care of the house, and now his relatives were ready to slander their loved ones and leave his grandfather to die, just to avoid responsibility and the cost of treatment. Zhang Feng pinched her husband and demanded that he apologize to his brother. Huang Yin approached the boy and asked his brother for forgiveness for his wrong behavior. The protagonist ignored his brother and said that he would cover all the costs of treatment, but for his grandfather's recovery, it was important that he was in a good mood. He asked all his relatives to visit his grandfather more often and talk to him. The scenes then take place on the street, where the main character walks through the city, thinking about his abilities and how to make money from them. However, he noticed something strange. He was surrounded by a gang of men, one of whom was holding a bat, and Yichio asked who they were and what they wanted from him. An old man approached the hooligans and said that the main character had forgotten about him so quickly. The guy looked at the seller and accused him of interfering with his plans to steal lottery tickets, and now he wants revenge. The seller replied that it was too late to ask for mercy, and he intended to make the boy disabled. The hooligans pounced on Yichio from all sides, and the boy wondered what to do in this situation. He realized that there were too many opponents against him, and he would have to use his abilities, which would require a lot of energy. One of the men decided to hit the main character, but he easily dodged. Yichio noticed that he could hit the other attacker who was approaching him and forcefully punch him in the stomach. The guy was amazed that one blow to the stomach immediately knocked the man out. But that was not all. The hooligans also took out their bats and rushed at Yichio, and he took a fighting stance. A few minutes later, the protagonist beat all the attackers and ordered them to leave. His keen eyesight allowed him to anticipate his opponent's attacks, and his reflexes were so enhanced. The beaten hooligans ran away, and a car stopped nearby, from which someone was watching. The man in the car said he didn't expect the young guy to be so good at fighting. The driver of the car asked the boss what they should do next and what their plan was. The boss explained that Elder Liu saw his abilities at the Ancient Stone exhibition and decided to hire him. The stranger asked how they could do this, considering that the guy didn't even go to work for Elder Qi. He replied that they needed to attract him to their company by any means necessary, even using his vulnerabilities. The action moves to a jewelry store, where a young guy stands opposite, about to go in. Upon entering the store, someone started shouting at Yichio, not believing that he'd dare to come here. It was his boss who was asking him about his absence from work yesterday. The protagonist replied that yesterday he was at the stone auction with Mr. Qi. The boss didn't believe him and said that he had too much imagination to date Qi. The guy replied that Li Chao was there too, and if she didn't believe him, she should ask him. She got angry and asked if he was aware of his position in society and what he was talking about. Yichio became very serious and ordered her to stop. The boss said she was fining him 500 yuan for absenteeism and firing him for being rude. From that day on, the guy no longer worked for their company, and although security called him, he decided to leave himself, confident that she would regret it. The pink-haired girl expressed regret for not getting rid of him sooner and insisted on his quick departure. Suddenly, the young man received a call on his mobile phone. When he picked up the phone, he heard Sue's voice asking if he had arrived at the store. As he was leaving the jewelry store, the guy replied that he had been fired and was now going to the hospital. Sue was surprised and promised to look into it and get him back to work. Zhang received a call from Zhang, and she rushed to pick up the phone to find out what he wanted. Zhang started shouting, demanding that Yichio be brought back to work, otherwise they would both face trouble. Hearing Zhang, the girl realized the seriousness of the situation and followed the guy. Su rushed out of the store and ran towards Yi Xiao, apologizing to him. He noticed her and, turning around, remembered that he had been working in the company for 3 months already and endured her humiliation every day. Su ran over and bowed to him, apologizing again and claiming that he should understand she was a girl. After replying that even if he forgave her, nothing would change, he mentioned Li Chao's arrest for theft. The young man suggested that Su was also involved in this, and that she too was at risk of arrest. The boss was shocked by these words and could not believe that Li Chao could do such a thing. 2 cars pulled up and the guards got out of one of them, approaching the protagonist and Su. The guards grabbed Su's arm, announcing an investigation into the company's interference and demanding that she follow them. Su apologized for the misunderstanding, but the guy said that it was not her fault and she did not need to apologize. Zhao promised to severely punish Su and apologize on behalf of the company for the suffering caused to him. Yi Xiao rejected the apology, noting that they had yet to thank him for helping his grandfather. Su promised to visit his grandfather when they had time. The red-eyed girl asked the guy to go into the warehouse and check something. Yi Xiao agreed, considering himself their employee before his official dismissal, and said that he would fulfill their request. The store employees were shocked by his high position in society and were glad that someone punished Su Jin. At the warehouse, Zhao explained that after interrogating Li Chao, they suspected that some of the goods in the warehouse might have been substituted. The girls would be happy if the guy would conduct a check, and he agreed. They found a green vase in the suitcase, and Yi Xiao decided to check it out. Upon closer inspection of the vase, a red light appeared before the guy's eyes, and he was surprised. He saw a man carrying a vase and noticed old clothes. Su was about to ask what was going on, but Zhao stopped her. The boy pointed to the vase and declared that it was genuine and belonged to the Shang dynasty. He then took the white bowl from the Song dynasty and confirmed its authenticity. The boy discovered that the bowl with the lid was a fake, no more than 10 years old. Studying antiques began to give him a headache. He fell to his knees from the pain in his head, and the girls ran to him to find out what had happened. Realizing he needed a break, he planned to check the rest later, realizing his abilities. Zhao thanked him and suggested that they go to see her grandfather in the hospital. After he left, Zhao told the red-eyed girl to check his results. Su confirmed that he was right. The red-eyed girl felt that it was something mystical, and they had to keep him in the company at any cost. The girl in green clothes agreed. When the protagonist entered the hospital, there was a guard at the door, and it occurred to him that this might have been ordered by Zhao. Opening the door, he entered his grandfather's room, where he was met by his father, who informed him that his friends had arrived and wanted to meet him. The guy who came in noticed that a man and his driver were sitting next to the grandfather. The man greeted the boy and introduced himself, and he turned out to be Chun Xiao, the assistant director of Fuyun Company. Guoqing noticed that Fuyun was Hongfu Company's main competitor and expressed surprise that they could be friends. Yi Xiao shook Qin Xiao's hand and asked how he could help, and Qin Xiao congratulated the guy and said that their director, Liu, highly praised his abilities, and now he would be able to rise to a new level of life, becoming very rich. The guy admitted that he didn't quite understand the situation, and the man with short hair said that their director liked Yi Xiao and that he wanted to offer the guy a good job. The protagonist closed his eyes, thanked him for the offer, and replied that he had to think about it. The man with short hair was dissatisfied with Yi Xiao's answer and asked how dare he say such a thing. The guy asked about the company's traditions and expressed surprise that they were trying to train him like a dog to use a litter box. The company employee got angry and threatened the guy, telling him to repeat his words to his face, otherwise he would be beaten so badly that he would crawl on his knees. Yi Xiao asked them to leave before he came to personally kick them out, and the boy asked his father if Grandpa had been scheduled for surgery. Chen Xiao noticed that the guy was too arrogant and dared to disdain their boss in response to his kindness. The guy replied that his boss despised him, otherwise he wouldn't have sent such workers. The father approached his son and said that he was too hot-tempered and that he should not have refused like that, given the company's connections with the mafia. The protagonist explained that he was no longer the same person he used to be, and working in Fuyun would be an insult to Hengwu. Guoqing agreed with his son, but they both worried about the possible consequences. The young man is afraid of blackmail that may affect his father or grandfather, and feels guilty for his rudeness. On the street, a man with short hair asked Chun Xiao what to do next, expressing his desire to kidnap the boy if he refused to work for them. Chun Xiao replied that he only had fights and killings in his head, and that he didn't know how to think with his head. The man smiled and stated that his abilities were limited to violence and murder, which is why they were so well suited to each other, but the question arose as to what to do with the guy. The red-eyed man said that he would make Yi Qiu beg them for a job. The scene shifts to the hospital, where the protagonist decides to take over guarding his grandfather, leaving Guoqing to rest. Yi Qiu assured his grandfather that he had arranged for his treatment, and that he would soon make a full recovery. The old man smiled, proud of his grandson. Some time later, the main character was lying next to his grandfather and decided to practice his abilities. He looked up and saw two men above him. Feeling his fatigue lessen, he decided to intensify his gaze. The boy realized that he might have increased his gaze penetration abilities and decided to try to increase their strength. After that, he closed his eyes, but felt a strong pain in them and screamed. The grandfather woke up and asked what happened, and the boy replied that he accidentally hit his head. The protagonist decided that this was due to the antique laser he saw earlier, and that the antique aura enhanced his abilities. He closed his eyes, realizing that even though he had gained abilities, his life still remained unchanged. The scene moves to a store where a man claims that the girl broke a Ming Dynasty vase and demands compensation. The girl objects that the vase was already cracked when he took it out, and a piece of it broke off at the slightest touch. The man doesn't believe her and claims that she is trying to deceive him. Yi Qiu intervenes and says that even though the girl didn't do it intentionally, she still has to compensate for the damage. The stranger insists on compensation, claiming that there is no justice here. The protagonist approaches Chun-Li with a question about what is happening, wanting to find out the details. Chun-Li explains the situation to him, confirming the girl's words. The guy urges her to stay calm and promises to figure out what's going on. The boy used his powers and asked the man who claimed that the vase belonged to a certain era if he had any documents. The man placed the documents on the table and announced that it was a certificate of authenticity for an antique, inviting him to check it to make sure the vase was genuine. Suddenly, two strange men entered the store, and one of them asked who the impudent man in the store was to doubt that their company had correctly identified the authenticity of the antiques. It turned out to be Master Lin and his assistant, and they explained that they had checked this Ming Dynasty vase 2 days ago, and that today it was broken. The stranger claimed that they still doubted the authenticity of the vase, to which Lin asked if he understood anything at all. Yi Qiu replied that the vase was a fake and suggested that Lin Yu check it again, as even experts could make mistakes. The men asked who the guy was to interfere so brazenly, saying that Lin was far above his level and who gave him the right to say such things. The protagonist asked Master Lin to take a close look at the vase that he had checked earlier. Lin replied that this was impossible, since he had examined it carefully and it looked absolutely genuine. The young man wanted to continue arguing, but Lin asked who he was to argue with him, and Yi Qiu suggested that Lin either check the vase again or leave. These words angered Master Lin, who said that the boy was insulting everyone present and asked how he could be so shameless. Yi Qiu proposed to make a bet. If the vase was genuine, he would pay double the price for it, and if it was fake, Lin would work for their company. The man agreed, but on the condition that if Lin won, the boy would have to kneel before him. The boy agreed, expressing his disapproval of Lin's treatment. The main character took out his phone and started calling, and the man told him to call and get the money ready. The young man called Zhao and asked about Lin Chong, and she replied that he was a high-class appraiser, the backbone of Ding Tai Company. Yichio announced that he was giving them a gift and asked her to prepare a contract for employment in their Hungfu company. He added that the rest was not so important and asked to organize the hiring process. The men started laughing, and Master Lin joked that the guy was a better advertiser for him than he was, and why he hadn't been nominated for an Oscar yet. Chun-Li took the papers and announced that her superiors had asked her to print them out for the guy, and he had replied that he would need them later. The men's laughter continued. Lin simply couldn't believe that Yichio still wasn't going to give up. The young man was determined as he approached the vase to pick it up. Grabbing the vase with one hand, he decided to throw the antique with all his might on the floor to demonstrate to everyone that it was a fake. Falling to the floor, the vase shattered into small pieces, and the main character began to look for the piece he needed. The entire store was shocked by the protagonist's actions, and Lin's heart sank at what he saw. The unknown man shouted, saying that the guy had gone completely crazy, and now Yichio would have to compensate him double. The protagonist picked up a piece of the vase and ordered Lin to look at it to determine whether it was a real vase or a fake. Approaching the guy, Lin took the piece of the vase from him and, examining it carefully, noticed the number 90 on it. The man began to get nervous, not believing his eyes, and Lin was at a loss for words. Yichio said that it was a good fake, and there was no shame in not noticing it, because even the best fakes sometimes deceive, and therefore checking was always justified. A man approached Lin and stated that he had checked the vase carefully and it could not be fake, and Lin apologized to Chun, but claimed that it was still a fake that he had missed. Chun exclaimed that this was impossible and accused them of conspiracy, claiming that the vase was very ancient and that they would either compensate him double for the damage or he would call the police. The young man replied that even if they called the police, Lin Chong had simply made a mistake in his work, and he would refund them the cost of the inspection. The men who showed up with counterfeit goods had broken the law and could be considered a criminal offense and risked 5 years in prison, and they were shocked by Yichio's words. The guy turned to Chun-Li and ordered him to call the police. Hearing this, the men quickly left the store, while Chun promised that they would meet again. The protagonist reassured Lin, assuring him that these two cowards would not dare to harm him. Lin thanked the guy, to which Yichio replied that they were colleagues at work and colleagues should support each other. Zhao and Su suddenly entered the store, accompanied by security guards and an unfamiliar guy. Zhao walked up to Lin and welcomed him to Hung Fu's company, expressing her joy at the new cooperation. The girl assured him that there was no need to worry about his previous place of employment and that they intended to send qualified lawyers to sort out all the formalities, and the penalty for termination of the contract would be paid by their company. Yichio encouraged Lin to sign the contract quickly by promising him money and attractive girls, and that was wonderful, wasn't it? Su was a little embarrassed by the protagonist's words, and the green-eyed girl felt a little uncomfortable. The guy smiled, walked up to the girls, and wanted to hand over the contract to Zhao, and Su watched Yichio closely and smiled too. The green-eyed girl smiled, handed the contract to Su, and declared that Lin would become the pillar of their company from this day on. Lin replied that there was no need to treat him so politely, since the real master here was Yichio, and he wanted to learn from him. The protagonist explained that he was not the best teacher and that he would soon leave and Lin would become the backbone of the company, and so he advised Lin to learn from Chi since he was a great master. The man was surprised, not understanding why the boy wanted to leave, because his abilities are very rare among masters, and he hoped to learn from him. The blue-haired guy asked them how stupid they were to think that Yichio could become the backbone of the company with such weak skills, and he thought that they were wasting their money by paying him a salary. The green-eyed girl turned to him and asked what he meant by that. Kuan replied that the girl was mistaken, the guy was just a liar, and they fell for his tricks. Zhao warned the boy to watch his words, because she saw Yichio's abilities, whom Chi praised, and therefore the only fool here was Kuan. The blue-eyed boy replied that she was too kind and old man she was crazy, so Ichio was obviously deceiving them. He pointed his finger at them and said that they were all plotting to deceive them. And how did Ichio know about the numbers inside the vase if he didn't have X-ray vision? Ichio said that if Kuin thought he was deceiving them, he should test him in any way he wanted, and it wouldn't hurt for the protagonist to improve his skills in dealing with antiques. Kuin smiled and declared that he would expose Ichio's deception and disgrace him, and he ordered the guards to bring him his treasure from the car. The security guards brought in the antiques, and the blue-eyed guy warned them to be careful and not to touch anything. The guy with blue hair asked the main character what era this thing was from. A young guy in a blue suit began to examine the antiques and walk around them. The protagonist kicked the antique and heard a dull sound, realizing what had happened. The blue-eyed boy asked why Ichio hit the antique, since if he broke it, he would never be able to earn compensation. Ichio replied that he didn't even use a strong blow, and it was just a fake from the Qing dynasty, which wasn't that expensive. Kuin asked why the guy thought the exhibit was a fake from the Qing dynasty, and the guy in the blue suit asked him to first tell him whether he was right or not. The blue-haired boy blushed and admitted that the protagonist was right. The young man grabbed Kuin by the shoulder and said that he didn't have to prove his abilities to him, and that Ichio simply thought that he shouldn't be so hot-tempered, and that Kuin shouldn't have called him a liar. The blue-eyed boy didn't know what to answer, as he was confused by the reaction. He added that Kuin shouldn't be angry, and the main character liked his thing and wanted to know how much the guy was going to sell it for. The blue-eyed boy raised his hand in front of Ichio and offered to sell this antique for 500,000. The main character touched the fake antique and said that he was ready to pay 200,000 for it. Kuin was shocked because he couldn't believe that the guy wanted to pay 200,000 for a fake, and the blue-eyed guy asked if Ichio was trying to deceive him. Ichio replied that Kong might think that he had overpriced it because they were friends, and he just wanted to know whether the blue-eyed guy would sell it to him or not. The blue-haired boy agreed, but added that this fake was worth a maximum of 100,000, and if he still decided to give him 200,000, he should not accuse Ichio of cheating. A young man in a blue suit approached Zhao and asked him to lend him 200,000, and he promised to return the money soon. Zhao replied that she would give the money back now, but she didn't need to return it, and let the guy think that she gave it to Ichio. The protagonist raised his hand and said that although he was a nice guy, he had no intention of becoming a gigolo. The girl began to feel embarrassed, not knowing what to answer to his words. At this time, there were 4 people sitting in the car, and a guy in a dark suit turned to Chen Xiao and said that he certainly couldn't be wrong. Chen Xiao replied that this young guy was indeed a master of antiques, but he was too arrogant, and Ichio pretended not to care. The man assured Liu that he knew how to make the guy listen, and he would still beg them to join the company. The action moves to an antique warehouse, where the protagonist asks the girl where she is from, and Su replies that she is from Banhai. Ichio took out a real child figurine from his pocket and noticed that it looked very similar to him. Su was surprised and asked if the main character was from Banhai. The guy replied that he was a Banhai at heart. The guy started to smile, but the girl became embarrassed and noticed that it wasn't that funny. The red-eyed girl remembered that it was better not to distract Ichio when he was looking at antiques. The young man told her not to worry, that she was not distracting him, and the girl was surprised at how good Ichio was and admired him. The protagonist noted that both Su and the beautiful girl, who became the chief director's assistant thanks to her abilities and who copes with Zhao, are great. The beauty noticed that the guy didn't know Zhao well. She was good inside, and if she scolded him, he shouldn't be offended. Ichio smiled and said that he wouldn't be offended since he no longer worked for their company. Su was surprised and said that if Zhao had offended him, she would apologize for her and would like him to stay in their company. She added that she wanted to be his colleague. The guy winked and suggested seeing each other every day, and if she didn't mind, even living together. The girl blushed and hit him, not understanding how he could suggest such a thing. A little time passed, and they came to a jewelry store, and the main character thought that ancient antiques improve his abilities, and his head did not hurt so much anymore. Two unfamiliar men entered the store, one of whom asked who had called them. Chun-Li replied that they were probably mistaken, since this was a jewelry store, not a place for defective goods. The main character stated that it was he who called them and asked them to take the antiques to his home. Sue noted that the item wasn't particularly valuable, but perhaps the guy would at least pack it. The young man smiled and said that the bowl was cheap, so he was not afraid of scratching it. Ichio ordered the men to throw the trash into the trunk and take it to his home. Further events unfolded at the main character's house, where he was carefully looking for something in his drawer. He took the hammer out of the box, took it in his hands, and hoped that he would be able to break the green cup. The boy hit the bowl with a hammer, and it broke, and a rolled-up diary fell out from inside. The protagonist decided to take the diary and see if it was worth the money spent on it. Picking up the diary, the boy noticed the inscription Heavenly Dragon Technique on the cover, but he didn't understand what it meant. Ichio opened a diary that belonged to Yinan Tian, a writer during the Jingguang reign in the 13th year, and he studied these techniques to strengthen vital energy and became a great martial artist. The young man began to think about becoming a great martial arts master himself, hoping that this diary would help him in this. When he entered his room, he found that the diary contained 3 techniques: heavenly, spiritual, and physical. He began to read, but realized that the content was not complete and that there must be other parts in the diary. The protagonist decided to absorb the energy of this ancient diary and felt that it was much stronger than that of an ordinary antique. Ichio decided that he would read the rest later, but for now he needed to visit his grandfather, who was scheduled for surgery today. The action then takes place in the hospital, where relatives watch as nurses take the grandfather to the operating room. The girls also came to the old man, and Zhao reported that they had found a very good doctor for him, the best surgeon in Zhonghai, and the operation would definitely be successful. The old man smiled and said that he and Yichio would thank her well when he recovered. Zhao replied that she and Yichio were friends, so they should help each other for free, and Grandpa agreed, adding that mutual assistance and friendship was the most important thing. The young man approached his girlfriends and said that they already had a lot of work to do, and it was better for them not to waste time here. The green-eyed girl agreed to return to the company, and Xingyu stayed to help here, handing over her work to another employee, and said that she would wait for Zhao. The nurse ran out of the operating room and asked if Yi Hongwei's relatives were there. All the relatives became tense, but Yi Qiu replied that they were here and asked how the operation went. The nurse reported that there was bleeding during the operation, and now the doctors are fighting for the patient's life, but the situation is critical, and it is better for everyone to prepare mentally. The protagonist asked how this could happen if the operation was performed by the best surgeon in Zhonghai. The blue-eyed girl explained that Dr. N was away on business today and had been replaced by another doctor, but only Dr. N could save his grandfather. Qing Yu was surprised because Zhao had personally arranged with the hospital for Dr. N to operate on this patient, and she didn't understand how this could happen. The nurse began to worry and replied that she did not know how this happened. The red-eyed girl began calling Zhao to inform her of the problems that had arisen. The doctor ran out of the operating room and asked where Dr. N was, since only he could handle the bleeding. Ichio was very excited and said to find Dr. N immediately, as his grandfather's life was on the line and he would not forgive them if he was not saved. Someone from behind asked about Dr. N Liang, and the protagonist and Qing Yu turned around. In front of them stood Chen Xiao, his friend and Dr. N. They were surprised that they collided again. The main character begged Dr. N to stop the bleeding and was ready to pay any amount of money. Chen Xiao apologized and said that Dr. N had left this hospital, and now this man and his personal doctor belonged only to him. The young man was shocked that they were trying to blackmail them with his grandfather's life. The man replied that Ichio was losing his mind and offered to sign a contract, after which he would allow Doctor and entreat his grandfather. Qingyu quickly snatched the contract from Chun Xiao's hands to read the terms herself. The contract stated that the guy would receive a special position, a salary of 3,000, and would work for 10 years. The girl stated that such conditions were slave-like and that this contract could not be signed. Chun Xiao warned that if he did not sign it quickly, he would never see his grandfather again, which made the girl angry. The guy wanted to agree, but suddenly strangers appeared, and Director Zhang apologized to Qingyu, admitting that their administration was to blame for this situation. Zhang urged doctors to remain calm and stop panicking, as the main thing is to take care of the patient. The red-eyed man warned Yi Qiu to think about his choice, as only Doctor could save his grandfather, and if they missed this chance, they would regret it. The young man asked the doctors about the condition of the bleeding, and the man replied that the bleeding was caused by a ruptured blood vessel, and they did not have time to examine it. Qiu asked the doctors what they would do if they could identify the source of the bleeding. The doctor replied that once the source of the bleeding was found, they would take steps to stop it, but this was an extremely difficult task. The protagonist stated that he would accompany them and show them where the vessel had ruptured, taking responsibility for his words. The boy's words shocked everyone, and he insisted that he be taken to his grandfather quickly. Zhang ordered the doctors to follow Qiu's instructions and escorted him to the operating room to see the old man. The guy was quickly taken to the operating room, and the main character began to use his abilities. Looking at his grandfather, the boy determined the location of the rupture of the third blood vessel from the bottom, estimating its depth at about 2 millimeters. The man was amazed at how the boy was able to determine the source of the bleeding. At this time, Chun Xiao approached Guoqing and expressed his regret for his son's stupidity, but noted that this was not the time for reproaches. He reminded that Guoqing is already an adult and must be aware of his responsibility, including for his grandfather's life. Qiu realized that his words could cause pain, and the protagonist's father was left without an answer in front of Chun Xiao. Suddenly, the doors of the operating room swung open and a nurse called for the way to be cleared. Guoqing rushed to the doctors to find out the results of the operation and was told that the bleeding had been stopped and the patient was temporarily safe. The man burst into tears of relief and thanked the doctor for saving his father's life. The doctor modestly noted that he was not the only one who saved a life, and that his son's help was incredibly valuable. Qingyu was surprised at how the protagonist was able to help and guessed that he might be studying medicine. Chun Xiao was confused, not understanding how the boy could help so much, while Doctor and Liang emphasized that they couldn't have done it without his help. Doctor and Liang added that it was incredible. Even with 4 doctors, it would have been difficult to handle the situation, and this guy had special help from a higher power. The doctor approached Zhang and informed him that the patient had lost a lot of blood and was now on life support, and that the operation would be delayed for some time. Zhang ordered that specialized personnel be notified of the need for 24-hour monitoring of the patient, and that a meeting of doctors be convened to discuss a treatment plan. The man with glasses approached the protagonist and Qingyu, apologizing for the misunderstanding. The young man noted that the blame does not lie with Zhang, but that vile people are involved in the matter. The protagonist decided to approach Chun Xiao, who predicted that Yi Qiu would sooner or later be brought to justice. Yi Qiu hit the man with all his might, and Chun Xiao didn't have time to dodge, falling to the floor. The man in the black t-shirt announced that the boy was now in trouble because he had hit his brother in vain. Chun Xiao stood up, full of anger at the guy, and the man warned that Yi Qiu would regret his actions. The guy delivered a powerful kick to the head of the man with red eyes, asking Chun Xiao what he was going to do, since his brother was just a bag of trash. Brother Chun Xiao asked what the boy wanted, then clenched his fist and was about to strike. But the young guy easily blocked the man's blow. It was easy for him. The man was shocked that Yi Qiu was able to stop his powerful strike. None of his opponents could do that. The protagonist hit Chen Xiao's brother on the leg, and he began to fall. The man did not expect such a quick reaction. Yi Qiu continued to kick the men, asking if they would threaten him again. Chen Xiao replied that the guy would get what he deserved. The boy asked Chen Xiao in surprise if he had gotten too carried away and if now was the right time to make threats. Guoqing ran up to his son, stopping him, saying that there was no need to beat them any further. The young man warned the men that he had taught them a lesson today, and that they should remember not to irritate Yi Qiu. The father told his son that they were members of the mafia and his actions had shamed them in front of everyone, but interfering would only anger the mafia even more. Qing noticed that the Fuyun company was willing to resort to dirty tricks for their own benefit and warned that they would not allow anyone to harm Yi Qiu and his family. Yi Qiu asked Su to delete the CCTV footage of the fight to avoid trouble with the police, and the girl agreed to help. At this time, the nurse was treating Chen Xiao's wounds left by the protagonist and asked who did this. Chen Xiao replied that it was Lu who did it. Yi Qiu, who did not want to cooperate with them, beat him and insulted him. Lu threatened that if the guy was so ungrateful, they would act decisively, and ordered Lei Hu to deal with him by breaking his legs. The red-eyed man took out a phone from his pocket and was about to call Lei Hu. Some time passed, and the protagonist was still in the hospital when the door swung open. He saw his father sitting on a chair and ordered him to rest while he was there. The father thanked his son and asked him to call him immediately if he heard any news about his grandfather, and Yi Qiu promised that his father should not worry. After that, the guy sat down on the bed and started looking for his diary, wondering what techniques were described there. Finding the diary, he opened it and began to meditate, trying to focus on his energy. Feeling the energy flowing through him, he felt a red glow in his body. When he opened his eyes, he felt refreshed and rested, realizing that these techniques were indeed effective. However, his meditation was interrupted by the ringing of his phone, and he saw that it was a call from Zhao. The protagonist asked what happened, and Zhao offered to invite him to breakfast. The scene shifts to a restaurant, where Zhang expressed her sincere desire to see the guy work for their company, offering an annual salary of 5 million yuan and company shares. Yi Qiu thanked her but refused to sign the contract, explaining that he had his own plans. The green-eyed girl asked the reason, and the guy replied that he had his own plans. She warned that Lu would not forgive him, and only their company could protect him. The guy smiled and said that she shouldn't worry about him. Zhao was embarrassed and warned that Yi Qiu did not understand the danger he was in. The protagonist assured her that everything was under control. The girl stood up and reminded him not to complain later that he was not warned. Yi Qiu left the restaurant and decided to take a walk in the fresh air to figure out what to do next. Suddenly, his old friend called him, and Yi Qiu was surprised why he remembered him, and the fat man asked the protagonist if he had forgotten what the date was today. The guy replied that today was the anniversary of the day the fat guy was rejected by a girl again, and the friend told Yi Qiu to go to hell because today was the graduation party. The young man admitted that he had forgotten about the party, and his friend pointed out that it was obvious, so Yi Qiu should quickly go to the Shangri-La restaurant where Wang Xiang was paying for everything. Arriving at the restaurant, he looked around and did not see his classmates, but suddenly heard his name being shouted. A fat man came up to him and asked what Yi Qiu had been doing for the past 6 months, and the guy hadn't called him even once during that time, so the fat man already thought that he had gone to Thailand, and the protagonist smiled. They started to have fun and laugh, but someone recognized them and said their names. It was Wang Xiang who greeted them and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, but that they hadn't changed at all. The fat man was surprised that Jing was not with the main character, and the guy replied that he shouldn't be surprised because they had broken up a long time ago. The friend felt awkward in front of Yi Qiu and apologized, saying that if he had known, he wouldn't have invited him here. Wang Xiang asked if Yi Qiu could support such a beautiful girl with his salary of 3,000 yuan, and then said that it was time for the fat man to start using his brains and get a normal job. The green-haired boy replied that Wang Xiang was rude to them, comparing them to himself, and his father gave Wang Xiang everything. One of their classmates said that they were born poor, while Wang Xiang opened a company whose annual revenue exceeds billions. People started saying that Wang Xiang was now the most successful graduate in their specialty. Jing said she regretted wasting several years with him. The guy in the suit replied that it was better to live in luxury with him than to suffer with Yi Qiu. His classmates pointed out that Yi Qiu must strive for success, since his salary was so low, which was a disgrace to their profession. The main character's friend got angry and said that they were taking too many liberties. During the meeting, they had only insulted each other. One of his classmates said that Yi Qiu was both fat and a disgrace to their group, and even if they became successful, they would still be unworthy of being called Wang Xiang's classmates. Wang Xiang approached the protagonist and said that he could help, and his company was short of a cleaner, and if he paid Yi Qiu 3,500 yuan, he would agree or not. The protagonist smiled and told his friend that they would not stoop to their level. Wang Xiang asked if Yi Qiu had become a great man, the boss of all the poor, and people began to laugh. Yi Qiu turned around and declared that he would give Wang Xiang 3 months to become his subject. The guy in the suit laughed and continued to bully Yi Qiu along with his classmates. The young man in the t-shirt said that Wang Xiang probably thought Yi Qiu was joking, but in 3 months he would strive to be friends with the protagonist. Wang Xiang replied that he would see what Yi Qiu had accomplished in 3 months and would hold a banquet to invite the boy to attend. The red-haired guy said that he would definitely come to the banquet and show what he was capable of. Elder Qi entered the restaurant, and the rich guy was surprised to see him in such a place. The rich guy ran up to Qi and asked him to chat, considering it an incredible coincidence that they ended up in the same restaurant. The guards asked the guy in the suit who he was. Wang Xiang said he was from Baoyan Company. His father had worked with Qi. Qi looked at the boy and realized who he was. Wang Xiang thanked him for his support and expressed regret that he had not met Qi earlier. Qi said that no thanks were required. The main thing was that the guy had good control over the goods, and he would be glad to cooperate, and then the old man left Wang Xiang because of business. People were surprised that Wang Xiang was able to talk to Elder Qi Jing, and she noticed that there was nothing unusual about their conversation. The old man was surprised to see his friend Yi Qiu and called him over, calling him friend, and the protagonist stopped. Everyone is shocked that the influential Elder Qi is hanging out with a guy they thought was poor. The protagonist smiled, recognizing Qi's familiar voice, and greeted the old man, who said that the boy refused to have dinner with him because of his classmates. Yi Qiu replied that he did not refuse, but he could not allow him to pay, since a young person should invite an elder. Qi said that Yi Qiu was too polite and he would not refuse if he was invited to a restaurant, and the old man had an important meeting, so he had to leave. The young man agreed, promising dinner next time. The friend hugged the main character and said that he was not so bad if he had connections, and he was happy for him. The fat man looked at his classmates and said that real leaders never shout about their authority. Unlike some, there are people who achieve some little things in life and start bragging about it to the whole world. Jing looked at the guy and replied that Yi Qiu was acquainted with Mr. Qi, but despite this, he was still very poor. The protagonist's friend told Yi Qiu that it was a good thing he broke up with her, otherwise her descendants would have inherited her low intelligence. The girl was very angry with the guys, and Wang Xiang said that there was no point in starting a conflict right now, and it was time for them to sit down at the table. The protagonist thanked his friend for his support, and the fat man replied that they were friends, but with Yi Qiu, there was always something more complicated, especially considering his interactions with Elder Qi. A little time passed, and they all entered the room to begin their dinner, waiting for the waiters with the food. Jing told her boyfriend that the two of them ate for 3 people. Their appetites were much higher than those of ordinary people. Wang Xiang replied that he had money, so it was no problem, and after all, It was the first and probably last time for these guys to visit such a luxurious place. Let them enjoy the food. One of his classmates noted that Wang Xiang has always been and remains a very generous person. The fat man said that the guy flattered Wang Xiang too much, without respecting others. The boys noticed that Yi Qiu was doing well in Hung Fu Company, so it was no wonder that Mr. Qi was familiar with him, and they guessed that the old man valued him as a small worker. Yi Qiu told his friend to ignore them, and that these people were not worth his anger. The guy with green hair was very angry with these people, and the fat man did not understand why they came to this banquet at all. The main character told the fat man that he had an idea to open his own business and start making money. Yi Qiu's friend was overjoyed. He couldn't believe that the protagonist had become so successful. The young man explained that he wanted to open his own business precisely because he was a loser. The fat man asked what kind of company he wanted to open, where and when, and the guy said that any help would be useful to him. The red-haired guy said that he was also not against helping, and he would like to create a joint business. The friend replied that this was impossible. He had no money, so he could only be a subordinate. Yi Qiu smiled and told his friend not to worry about money. He was the one he needed. The guy with green hair claimed that if he valued him, he would never let him down, even if they had no money, but they were truthful and would cope, and the fat man was interested in what kind of company they wanted to open. The main character said that they were planning to open their own jewelry company. The fat man noted that even if they wanted to open a jewelry company, the market was already monopolized by 3 companies, and it would be difficult to resist. The young man smiled and agreed that it would be difficult, but not impossible. His friend supported them and expressed his willingness to go all the way, urging them to take risks. Wang Xiang remembered that they had a game room and expressed his desire to play with Yi Qiu. Jing asked her boyfriend why he was invited, considering that the guy had no money. The guy smiled and said that he could lend the money, but he was afraid that Yi Qiu would not accept the challenge. His classmates laughed and said that the guy wouldn't be able to repay the debt, and it was better not to give him money. The girl noted that there was no point in lending money to Yi Qiu, since the guy would not be able to return it. The protagonist smiled and agreed to Wang Xiang's invitation. Wang Xiang warned that the game would be big, but he would not demand money if the guy lost, considering that the guy had a lot of money. Yi Qiu noted that he didn't need to borrow money, but he was interested in playing. The rich guy asked the protagonist if he could play blackjack, offering to play for 100 yuan per round. A young man in a t-shirt noticed that 100 yuan was too little and suggested playing for 500. The guy in the suit agreed to play for 500 yuan. The action moves to the gambling hall, where Wang Xiang becomes a banker and Yi Qiu agrees. The dealer deals the cards, and the guys are determined to beat each other. The protagonist uses his abilities to look at Yi Qiu's cards. Yi Qiu smiles, knowing that he will beat the rich guy no matter what. All the spectators watch the game with interest, supporting Wang Xiang because they were sure that he simply could not lose to the poor guy. The red-haired guy thought about it, seeing that the dealer had 15 points and she was going to take another card, while he had 7 and 9 points. The guy in the t-shirt turned to the dealer and asked for another card. The fat man warned his friend not to take another card, as they already had 19 points and could lose. The young man did not listen to his friend's advice and insisted that he needed another card. The friend was unhappy and warned that if the next card gave them more than 2 points, they would lose. Wang Xiang smiled and pointed out that the protagonist's greed might not please them, but many thought that the guy just wanted to take a risk. The dealer dealt him another card, and the fat man was delighted to see that it was the ace of spades, giving them 20 points. The audience was surprised by the guy's luck, and Wang Xiang was concerned about this development. The rich guy decided to take a risk and asked the dealer for another card. But this card was unnecessary, and the rich guy had more than 21 points. He lost. Fatty and Yi Qiu high-fived each other and began to laugh, happy about their victory over Wang Xiang. The guy in the suit noticed that the main character was very lucky to win 500 yuan, but will he be able to repeat his luck? The protagonist smiled and looked at the rich guy, asking how much they would be playing for. Wang Xiang proposed to play for 100,000 yuan, challenging the protagonist to such a bet. Ichio agreed, and the dealer began dealing cards again until the protagonist used his ability again. The young man in the t-shirt smiled and thanked Wang Xiang for his generosity. Wang Xiang ignored his words and insisted that the dealer give him a card, confident of his victory. The main character looked at the cards and discovered that he had 21 points. They showed their cards, and the rich guy was disappointed and amazed, not believing in such luck. The rich guy shouted that he wanted to play again, but Yichio warned him, saying that he had better stop or he would lose a lot of money. But Wang Xiang had no intention of stopping. He was determined to win it back. But in the next 3 games, the rich guy only lost, and he was shocked by his failures. Wang Xiang was very excited, and his classmates began to suspect him of cheating. One of Wang Xiang's friends got angry and said that Yichio had been with them from the beginning, and it was impossible for the cards to be manipulated, which made them think that the protagonist was a scammer. Another classmate suggested that they had bribed the dealer and fixed the game, and the girl was shocked by such accusations. Spectators in the gaming room began to say that something was wrong, since the guy could not win for so long. One of the main character's classmates noted that the swindler would not always be able to win, otherwise it would arouse suspicion. The croupier claimed that she had not colluded with anyone and did not even know the guy's name. The rich guy waved his hands and asked if Yichio was tired of deceiving him. Wang Xiang pointed his finger at the girl and said that she knew him and called the authorities to look into it. The protagonist told the rich guy that he was retarded by organizing a banquet and a game, choosing Yichio as the dealer, and the guy thinks that Yichio is a psychic and bribed the right person. The guy in the suit said he didn't know how the protagonist did it, but he definitely tricked him and they needed to force him to confess. The girl tried to calm the guys down, suggesting that they talk to avoid a fight. The rich guy threatened that if the guys beat him and Yichio confessed, he would split the entire pot with them. Yichio stated that Wang Xiang was bringing shame on his family, and the rich guy was trying to bribe their friends to beat him up, and the protagonist warned that they had better not fight him. One of the guys got ready to hit the main character, but the main character was able to defeat his opponent with one blow, stood up, and invited them to come over if they were not afraid of him. They decided to punish Yichio together so that he could not dodge their attacks. The fat man approached the main character and suggested that they run away before it was too late, because they had nothing to lose. The red-haired boy smiled and thanked him for the advice, confident that this group of idiots couldn't do anything to him since he was stronger. The main character quickly dealt with all his opponents. They were powerless before his power. Wang Xiang and Jing were surprised by the boy's strength as he dealt with all of his classmates. Yichio looked at the rich guy and said that it was his turn now, and Wang Xiang was afraid of him. The rich guy quickly ran away, warning that the protagonist would regret his actions. Yichio's friend noticed that he had become too strong in these 2 years and was curious about how he had achieved such strength. The young man said that he did not expect that in 2 years the souls of his classmates would become so corrupted, and their society was worse than a bucket of dirt. Their way of life and views of the world led to failure. You can rely on your own strength, but your lackeys will always be disappointed. He approached Zhong and thanked her for not supporting them, and he wanted to give 50,000 yuan to all the beaten guys and keep the rest of the money for himself. Zhong replied that she didn't need money, but the protagonist insisted, saying that he might need her help someday. The guys decided to leave, and the fat man said goodbye to the beautiful girl. A friend asked if the main character liked Zhong and why he gave her the money. The protagonist replied that he had his own logic and let her first show who she really was by posting her thoughts on the internet. The fat man saw that Zhong's mother was sick and was surprised that the protagonist was still interested in the lives of his classmates. Yichio replied that they studied together and he had feelings for them, but he was upset to see how they had changed. The green-haired boy said that there was no point in feeling sorry for them, because now they looked at him as a father. The red-haired guy told the fat man that if he cooperated with them, he would not regret it. They went outside, and the main character got into a taxi, saying goodbye to his friend. Wang Xiang called his men and said that Yi Qiu had gone in a taxi, so they needed to hurry. The rich guy sat in the car and claimed that the main character was already dead and nothing could help him. Suddenly, a car cut off the taxi, and the driver was shocked that this man even had a driver's license. The main character looked out the car window and noticed a motorcyclist who was following him. The driver couldn't understand why they were surrounded and thought that it could have been the mafia, and the main character was already tired of it. Yi Qiu smiled and ordered the driver to stop, explaining that these people had come for him. The stranger asked the protagonist who he had angered so much that the mafia came for him. The car stopped, and a strange guy with a tattoo on his arm knocked on the car window. The red-haired guy opened the car window and asked what they wanted from him and why they stopped the taxi. The man replied that their boss wanted to see him. The main thing was that the guy listened, otherwise his friend would be beaten, and then he would go with them. The main character became serious and agreed to go with them and obey. They took him to the villa, and the guy thought that only a very rich person could afford such a house, and if something like this had happened to him before, he would have been scared. The young man asked the men to wait so that he could test with his abilities what was waiting for him inside. The guy used his abilities to look at the villa, but saw nothing unusual. Yi Qiu smiled and said that he was ready to go further with them. He was calm. When they entered the house, the stranger informed his boss that they had brought him. The boss looked at the guy with a menacing gaze, but he was not afraid and did not say anything. The stranger smiled and said that Yi Qiu was not bad. He was not even afraid of him. The protagonist asked the blonde man what his boss's name was, and the man was surprised and asked why the guy didn't know who. The red-haired guy said that he couldn't believe that he had met the great and unique Zhonghai and had heard a lot about Lei Hu. The guard got angry and grabbed the guy by the shoulder, asking how dare he call the boss by his first name. The guy turned around and asked the man to remove his hand from his shoulder, threatening him. Lei Hu smiled and noted that everyone was talking about Yi Qiu's success, and judging from his behavior, he was far from weak. But one guy paid a lot of money to have a man hurt him. He didn't want to take on the job because he had a lot of money, and yet Lei Hu was in debt to the man, and he had to agree. The young man explained to Hu that he had misunderstood the situation, and the protagonist was not saying this because he was successful, and everyone knew that Hu had a lot of money and influence, and even a successful guy could not compete with him. The man admitted that the protagonist had good logic and was smart, and he felt sorry that Yi Qiu had angered the influential person. In another situation, he might have just been let go. Hu added that it was too late to change anything, and they would have to beat the guy up and just make it as painless as possible for him. The protagonist asked him to stop, and he had a very tempting offer for Lei Hu. The hero of Zhonghai explained that Yi Qiu did not understand their laws, and in their circles, friendship and honesty were valued, and if someone promised something, they had to fulfill it. Yi Qiu said that he could cure his daughter's illness and the man would let him go, and Lei Hu was very surprised, not understanding how the guy knew about this. The security told the boss not to listen to him. He was just stalling for time. His daughter's illness was intractable, and how could he be so sure that he could help? The young man noticed that Hu often felt dizzy and had a feeling of pressure on his chest. The man said that now he would answer for his words, but he had never had such problems. The red-haired guy suggested that if he could admit it, he would cure him, otherwise it would only make things worse for all of them. The stranger said that Yi Qiu was being too presumptuous and decided to beat him up. Lei Hu agreed to a deal with the young man, but he must not speak publicly about his problems. The man warned that if Yi Qiu deceived him, he would not get away with just losing his arms and legs. The protagonist asked what would happen if he didn't cheat, and Lehu replied that then he would be in his debt. Suddenly, the door opened and Dr. walked in, and one of the guards informed the boss of his arrival. The boss invited the doctor in, and the young man turned to see him. Dr. asked why Ichio was here. Lehu asked the boy if they knew each other or if they had just met before, and replied that they had met before, but he didn't understand what he was doing here. Lehu covered his face with his hand and said that he came to examine his daughter and help cure her. The old man pointed his finger at Ichio and said that the guy didn't even have a medical certificate, and he accused him of cheating and warned that the guy would only make Lehu's daughter's condition worse. The man was surprised, thinking that if the guy worsened his daughter's condition, it would be even worse. The guy told the doctor that a doctor who violates medical ethics has no right to make comments to him. Ichio looked at the doctor and said that he was willing to bet with him if he thought the boy couldn't handle it, and smiled and said that there was no point in arguing with a professional because in medicine their levels could not be compared. The protagonist suggested trying to treat Lehu one at a time, and the one who could eliminate his symptoms would win. The young man asked Lehu if he would agree to such a test. Lehu agreed, saying he would be happy to try. The doctor agreed, suggesting that they start with him so that the boy could not blame him for an unfair victory. The boy agreed, preferring to start with the doctor, confident that he could quickly help Lehu. The old man said that the protagonist would not be able to cure Lehu and would only be disgraced, and began examining Lehu, taking his pulse, and asking him to open his mouth. He then announced that Lehu must take certain medications to recover within 3 months, advising him to abstain from alcohol and smoking. Lehu took the prescription and admitted that he would not be able to quit drinking and smoking. The main character supported the doctor's advice about the dangers of smoking and alcohol, although he did not approve of his attitude towards it. The doctor expressed a desire to see how the boy would cope with the task of treating Lehu. The young man explained that Lehu's health had suffered due to his lifestyle, and he wanted to help fix it. Lehu sat down, and the protagonist pointed out that in order to fully recover, the man needed to change his lifestyle, and couldn't understand how the guy was going to help Lehu in this way. Ichio began to use his abilities to heal Lehu. Lehu felt a sharp pain in his chest and began to cough, feeling strange. The protagonist said that everything was ready and asked Lehu to stand up and start moving. Lehu stood up, the pain and pressure in his chest disappeared, and he felt completely healthy, and he was very happy about it. The young man explained that he had relieved the symptoms of the disease, but they would return if Lehu did not change his lifestyle, including stopping drinking alcohol, smoking, and eating fatty foods, and exercising. The doctor accused the guy of lying and said that his injections could only temporarily alleviate the symptoms, but not cure the disease in a couple of minutes. The red-haired guy said that the doctor was wrong, but he still doubted Ichio's abilities and didn't understand why the injections were needed, and the doctor thought that Lehu was hopeless and didn't believe that he could feel any relief. Lehu expressed his resentment towards the doctor, saying that he had not done his job well enough and despised him. The old man began to worry and asked his boss for forgiveness for his words, admitting his mistake. The boss demanded that the old man apologize to Ichio, otherwise he would face punishment. The doctor bowed before the main character and apologized for his words, expressing his guilt. The protagonist emphasized that a real doctor should never resort to threats for his own benefit, and asked the doctor to leave. The doctor agreed with the boy's opinion and asked for forgiveness, stating that he no longer wanted to see him. Lehu agreed, expressing his indignation towards the doctor. Lehu asked the protagonist if he wanted the doctor to be hired by someone to get rid of him. The doctor began to panic and beg not to kill him. The protagonist told Lehu not to kill the doctor, but simply ask him to leave, as he irritates him. Lehu suggested that the doctor thank Ichio for his kindness. The boss expressed admiration for the protagonist's skill, recognizing his talent. The young man asked if Lei Hu wanted to beat up the doctor after all this. Lei Hu stated that if the boss forgot about the protagonist's kindness after all this, then he would not consider him a human being. The main character thought about it and turned to Lei Hu, asking what to do with the one who gave him the order to beat up the guy. Lei Hu smiled back and explained that Wang Xiang had offered him a large sum of money and asked him to kill Yi Qiu, but the man felt obligated to the protagonist's father. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken on the task, and so the guy didn't have to worry. Lei Hu would take it on himself. Yi Qiu placed his hand on his chest and promised to do his best to repay the man by helping his daughter. The man replied that if Yi Qiu could cure his daughter, he would regard him as his own brother, and no one in Zhonghai would dare to touch the protagonist. Further events unfolded in Lei Hu's daughter's room, where the guy began to examine the girl. The young man noted that Dr. and Liang had not taken good care of her, which had led to serious blood congestion in her organs. The boss noted that Dr. and had also mentioned blood stasis but had been unable to cure it, and he wanted to know if something could be done about it. The red-haired guy suggested that they give him a set of needles and turn the patient over onto her stomach. They turned the girl over, and the young man began to run needles down her back. Seeing this, the man became very worried about his daughter and grabbed the fair-haired guy by the neck. The protagonist turned to Lei Hu and asked the girl to stand up a little so that he could assess the result. The guy walked up to the boss's daughter, stretched out his hands, and wanted to clap his hands. Yi Qiu clapped his hands, and the girl closed her eyes, but soon opened them again. The blond man was glad that the girl blinked, and the father was also surprised. The man explained that his daughter was startled by the sharp clap of his hands, which caused a reaction, which indicates her ability to respond to external stimuli. The young man confirmed the blond man's words, saying that the initial effect of the treatment was present. When Lei Hu approached his daughter, he asked if she could see her father, if she could feel his presence. Suddenly, the device reacted, indicating that the girl saw her father in front of her. Everyone was amazed by this fact, as the girl showed a reaction, and the device responded to the change in her heartbeat. Lei Hu shed tears, took the protagonist's hands, and thanked Yi Qiu, declaring that from that day on, he considered him his true brother. The protagonist noted that the girl's condition was very serious. Her consciousness was not fully restored, and the treatment required continuation, and therefore he would visit her once every 2 days. The boss admitted that he didn't know how to thank the guy and took out his illegal credit card without a password or limit, deciding to give it to the main character. However, Yi Qiu felt embarrassed and noted that this was too generous a gift that he could not accept. The man put a credit card in the protagonist's palm and assured him that it was a small thing and that the guy would accept his gratitude. The young man took the card and remarked that if Lei Hu considered him a brother, then he must return the card back. Otherwise, they could not be considered brothers, but simply partners. The boss agreed with his words, noting that they should help each other like brothers, and promised to help in any matter. Lei Hu announced to his guards that Yi Qiu was now his brother, and he should be a highly respected guest in their home. A day passed, and the protagonist was lying on the bed when Su Qinghua called him, and he picked up the phone and asked what happened. The girl apologized for disturbing him so early, but she had an urgent problem and needed his help, and she asked if he had any free time. The guy was surprised and said that it would be a great honor for him to help a beautiful girl, and he would always have time for Su Qing. Su Qing asked the protagonist to pretend to be her boyfriend for today, and Yi Qiu was surprised by this proposal. She explained that her family is trying to marry her off to someone, but she doesn't want him, so she wants her parents to think she already has a boyfriend. The protagonist agreed to help her, and the girl gratefully said that she had already sent him her address. Yi Qiu suddenly remembered that he didn't have any normal clothes. All his things were cheap, around 10 yuan. The action moves to the place indicated by the girl, and the guy entered the establishment where there were many successful and rich people. The red-eyed girl greeted him and came up to him, and the protagonist smiled back. The girl was embarrassed and asked why he was dressed like that, and the guy replied that he couldn't find a store on the way and didn't have any other clothes. Su-ching introduced him to her friends so that they could get to know each other better. The guy in the suit was disappointed and asked why the girl chose such a poor guy. It seemed strange to him. The beauty replied that it was her choice and she did not associate it with him, and she was unhappy with the way he reacted to her boyfriend. Zhang Jin stated that he wants a better future for her, and her boyfriend looks like a poor loser, and how can she be happy with him? The guy added that he graduated from Harvard and his earnings were in the millions, and with him, she could live a carefree life. He approached the main character and warned him not to embarrass himself in front of them, and it was clear to everyone that he was trying to become a gigolo, and it was shameful if a man couldn't make money. The male lead smiled and replied that Zhang Jun really knew how to make money, and Yi Qiu could be a good gigolo, and the guy in the suit could make money, but Su Qingwa wanted to be with Yi Qiu, and that meant something. The rich guy looked at Yi Qiu with confusion and asked what this meant. Yi Qiu hugged Su Qing and replied that this meant that in her eyes, the protagonist was better and more successful than Zhang Jun, and the girl became embarrassed and asked why he said this. The guy in the suit got angry and said that the main character was just pathetic. All he could do was talk and had no control over his words. The red-haired boy asked Zhang Jun if he thought his earnings made him better than others. Zhang Jun replied that when the guy earned as much as he did, then we could talk about equal conditions. The protagonist smiled and said that he would teach him a lesson so that Zhang would know that he was far from the only one. He asked the rich guy if he knew Hongfu Company, and Zhang replied that he did, and that it was one of the largest jewelry companies in Zhonghai. Yiqiu wanted to know if he knew Xiaomi Rue. Zhang asked what he meant by that. The guy in the t-shirt said that he would now call the girl so that she would come and ask him to give him a year's salary in front of everyone, and then we would see who of them was a beggar. The rich guy laughed and said that Yiqiu thought he could give orders to Hongfu Company and that in order to see the boss, one had to make an appointment in advance. The red-haired guy started calling Zhao and told Zhang Jun not to think that he was being deceived. Zhang Jun asked the protagonist if he was planning to rob not only Su Qing, but also Hongfu's company. Director Zhao picked up the phone and asked what Yi Qiu wanted, and he called about her proposal and wanted to talk in person, and he said that he was currently in Shangri-La. The guy in a blue suit said that any fool can talk on the phone, and the red-haired guy was just deceiving him. Su Qing told Yi Qi that there was no need to do this, but the protagonist announced that Zhao would be coming soon. The green-eyed girl entered the establishment with her guards and looked for Yi Qiu. A restaurant employee approached her and asked how many people she wanted to register for the table. Zhao replied that she didn't need to register anything. She came on business to meet with Yi Qiu. She walked up to the table where the main character was sitting and was surprised that Su Qing had also come here. Yi Qiu said that it was the beauty who convinced him to start working with Hongfu, and so he called Zhao here to discuss the details. The red-eyed girl was confused by the main character's words and looked at him. She was very pleased to hear it. Zhang Jun stood up and greeted Zhao, introducing himself and saying that he had heard a lot about her. The green-eyed girl responded to his greeting and asked if they needed to reserve a separate room to talk with Yi Qiu. The protagonist smiled and replied that they didn't need to do that. He wanted to have lunch together. They still had untouched food. The girl said that she had already eaten and would like to get down to business right away, and if the guy was willing to work with them, Zhao would pay him whatever he said. The red-haired guy said that he wanted her to name a suitable salary for him. Zhao smiled and said that she was willing to negotiate for 10 million yuan a year, plus bonuses, and the main character was a very valuable employee, so the bonuses would also be in the millions. The young man looked at Zhang Jing to see his reaction, and the rich man was shocked. The green-eyed girl said that as a thank you for his consent, she wants to give him an elite villa, as well as provide him with a car with a personal driver. Yi Qiu waved his hand and told the girl to wait for a while. He had urgent business here. He approached the rich guy and asked how he felt now, and Zhang Zhen felt very awkward in front of the protagonist. The guy in the t-shirt added that power is not in how much you earn, but in how much your skills are in demand. The protagonist told Zhang Zhen not to approach Su Qing again, and the rich guy had to leave here. The girl in pink said that if he invited her here just to play a prank on this guy, then he had achieved his goal, and now let him sign the contract. Recently, she was sincerely happy that the male lead agreed to accept their job offer, and she hoped that the guy was also sincere, and Su Qing apologized and said that it was her fault. The red-haired guy said that it wasn't her fault, and even if they hadn't met today, he would still come to Zhao in the coming days, so he didn't want to put it off until later. Su Qing finally asked Ichio if he would accept the job offer from their company, and she really wanted to know. Ichio was very grateful to Zhao for inviting him to work, but he was interrupted by the green-eyed girl, warning him that he would regret it. The green-eyed girl, angry, began to leave, and the young guy wanted to stop her and asked her to listen to him. The protagonist sighed and noted that the girl was too unpredictable to talk to. Turning around, the boy noticed that Su Qing had started to cry, and Ichio asked why she was crying. The beauty replied that they had a fight because of her, and she felt very awkward in front of the guy. The young man promised that he had something to make Zhao happy, and Su Qing shouldn't worry. She would forget about everything once she found out. The action then takes place at his friend's villa, where the guy was treating Lei Hu's daughter's back with needles. The green-haired girl was seated on the bed to assess the results of the treatment. The guard reported that she had learned to move her pupils again and invited Boss to take a look. Lei Hu walked over and saw his daughter, who had just smiled. Ichio advised paying attention to the girl's mood and turning on relaxing music in her room. The friend thanked the protagonist for treating his daughter, and Ichio realized that he had used all the energy he had absorbed from the antiques to treat her. He realized that without this energy his techniques would be less effective, so he decided to turn to Zhao. Lei Hu offered to call a driver for the guy. Ichio thanked Brother Lei and asked him to go to Lin to be with her, which would help his daughter. After leaving the villa, he took out his phone to call Zhao. The girl said that after everything that happened, he had no right to call her, and Ichio asked what he wanted. The red-haired guy said that he wanted to tell her earlier, but she left, and he asked Zhao to curb her temper. Zhao got a little angry and asked him to tell her what it was about. The action moves to an area where there are many villas, and the protagonist heads to Zhao by car. The guy got out of the car, putting on a nice shirt so that no one would think of him as a beggar anymore. Ichio walked up to the guards and wondered why this villa was considered the best in the city, even having its own beach. The guards told the guy that the area was closed to outsiders and that permission was required. The protagonist replied that his name was Ichio. Zhao knew about his arrival, so he didn't need permission. The man smiled and said that if he was the boss's guest, he could be let in. The guy entered the house and thought that the building looked very luxurious, but he did not understand where such unpleasant energy was coming from. He was met by an unfamiliar man in a wheelchair and a girl, and he greeted them. Uncle Zhao smiled and said that he had heard positive comments about the protagonist's skills from Qi and also noted his gentlemanly appearance. The red-haired guy waved his hand and replied that he was being praised too much. He was not used to it. The green-haired guy walked up to the girl and said that Ichio was the guy that made her not want to talk to him. Zhao Meng Rui turned to the boy and explained that he had misunderstood, but the boy pointed out that there were many deceivers in the world now posing as sorcerers. They had to check him out since there are a lot of scammers these days, and everyone was shocked by the green-haired guy's words. Ichio agreed, adding that nowadays many people pretend to be feng shui masters, but only a few actually understand it. The men behind the green-hair boy explained that they were the heirs of the Southern Temple, experts in metaphysics, and Mao Jie had already reached a high level of mastery. No one should insult the adherents of their temple. First you need to look at yourself, and then judge the masters. The protagonist asked if they were such masters, why didn't they destroy all the bad energy in this villa? Uncle Zhao wondered how Yichio knew about the bad energy in their house. The guy turned out to be an expert in mysticism. Mao Tse smiled and asked if the protagonist could simply drive the evil spirits out of this house. The heirs of the Southern Temple explained that the guy doesn't know what he's getting into. If this evil spirit was weak, they wouldn't have been invited here, and they've already come, but the evil spirit swallowed up the real master. The green-haired guy expressed his anticipation of the moment when the evil spirits would devour the protagonist, believing that his cries for help would only complicate the task. Ichio asked what would happen if he dealt with the evil spirits. Mao Jie replied that in that case, he would become his disciple. The monk asked the protagonist what would happen if he could not drive out the evil spirits from Zhao's house. The young man replied that in that case, he would become Mao Jie's disciple. But Mao Jie became angry and declared that Yi Qiu could never become his disciple under any circumstances. The red-haired guy smiled and asked the monk what exactly he wanted from him. Mao Jie replied that if the protagonist failed to deal with the evil spirit, it would devour him and his life would be in danger, and in that case, Yi Qiu would beg him for help. Zhao Meng Rui approached the boy and asked if he was confident that he could handle the task, and if Yi Qiu couldn't handle it, he would have to beg the monk. The protagonist replied that Zhao Meng Rui should not even ask such questions, since he does not like it when people do not believe him. Mao Jie came over and said that they were starting, and expressed his desire to see how Yi Qiu would deal with the evil spirits. They moved down the corridor, and the protagonist tried to find out where the negative energy was hiding. Suddenly, he felt a strange force coming from the door and demanded that it be opened. They found nothing in the room except scattered things. The green-eyed girl noted that it was very cold in the room, much colder than outside. The monk explained that the main character was simply lucky to discover the dwelling place of the evil spirits, and warned that they were very strong. Yi Qiu pointed to the place where the evil spirit was hiding and asked for a hammer. The girl asked how he determined the location of the evil spirits and why he needed a hammer. The main character took a hammer and began to hit the wall, after dismantling which they discovered an antique mirror. Uncle Zhao said that the feeling that had been bothering him for many years was related to this mirror, and that it was more than just stress and lack of sleep. Mao Tse warned everyone to be careful and pointed to the mirror. The monk used his powers to drive out the evil spirits from Zhao's house and destroy them. The monk's fire beam collided with the mirror with sudden force, but it resisted his magical energy, causing the protagonist to be surprised by Mao Jie's abilities. Under the influence of the monastic light, the mirror began to sparkle, blinding the protagonist and depriving him of the ability to see its bright shine. The green-haired boy looked around in surprise, not believing that the mirror remained untouched, leaving no trace on itself. Suddenly, the monk's most powerful weapon broke in his hands, leaving him in shock and confusion. The mirror rose above them, radiating a power that amazed everyone with its might, showing how strong the evil spirits were. The evil spirit intended to attack the monk with its beam, but the protagonist intervened, saving him from certain death. The beam of fire struck the objects around it, causing everyone in the room to marvel at its power and destructive energy. Mao Jie was at a loss as to how to react, and Yi Qiu ordered everyone to leave the room. The protagonist pointed to the exit, causing everyone to run away, warning that the room had become too dangerous to stay in. The mirror suddenly shot a beam of fire at the young boy's back, causing him to turn around and see the horror that was preparing for him. Yi Qiu failed to dodge the beam, and the mirror struck the protagonist, depriving him of his sight. The monk looked at Yi Qiu with concern, asking what happened to the guy and feeling awkward in the emptying room. The red-haired boy opened his eyes, but now they were glowing blue, and a third eye appeared on his forehead. The young man, standing motionless in place, began to glow with a bright light, his gaze directed at the ceiling. The action moves to another room, where the main character is lying on a bed, causing concern among those around him. The guy opened his eyes, and the green-eyed girl approached him, asking how he was feeling. He assured her that he was fine, although his body hurt, and asked her not to worry about him. Manhwa sat down next to him and insisted that he continue to lie down and rest, warning him against returning to the dangerous room. The protagonist looked at her, asking about the fate of the mirror, and heard a warning about its danger. The green-eyed girl warned him against approaching the mirror, emphasizing its mortal threat. The young man got out of bed and declared that, in his opinion, the mirror no longer posed a threat. They went to the room where there was a mirror that no longer sparkled, and the protagonist approached it. Taking the mirror in his hands, he announced that Uncle Zhao's body had weakened due to the influence of this artifact, but now he had cleansed it of evil spirits, and the man would begin to recover. Yichio turned to the monk and declared that Mao Jie had lost their bet. The monk bowed and expressed gratitude to the protagonist for saving his life, promising not to forget about it, and then apologized for his rudeness. The boy smiled and accepted the monk's apology, but refused to accept him as a disciple. The green-haired boy grabbed the protagonist's hand and begged him to accept him as a disciple, wanting to fulfill the conditions of the bet, and Yichio felt uneasy about such a request. The protagonist replied that he was not sure that he could teach Mao Jie anything and how to do it. Mao Jie looked at the red-haired boy and stated that his skill was his main motivation, and he hoped that when his level became higher, Yichio would be able to teach him what the protagonist knew. The red-haired boy agreed that if there was no need for an apprenticeship for now, then so be it, but Yichio didn't want to be called a master because it made him feel uncomfortable. The young man turned around and noticed the green-eyed girl looking at him, and he did not understand why her gaze seemed so strange to him, almost scary, even more than the mirror. The green-eyed girl asked the main character to tell about his other talents. Yichio replied that he had many talents, including in the field of relationships, so the girl could be calm about him. Manhwa shouted that the guy was stupid and raised her hand to hit him in the face. But Uncle Zhao intervened and said that there would be no violence in his house and suggested that the girl stop, and Manhwa stopped and refused to beat the boy any further. The girl decided to leave, and Uncle Zhao approached the young man, offering to talk to Yichio in the living room, and the young man agreed. They sat down on the sofa in the living room, and the man thanked the protagonist for driving out the evil spirits and ensuring the safety of all the residents of the house. The protagonist smiled and asked the man to call him by his name, since he was older than Yichio and there was nothing to thank him for. The man said that for him, the exorcism was an important event and decided to generously reward the boy for his help, offering 100 million yuan. The young man was shocked by such an offer, as he had never dreamed of such a huge amount of money. Yichio noted that even if doctors constantly save people's lives, accepting huge sums of money from each patient can cause fear of illness. Uncle Zhao pointed out that doctors still receive compensation for their work, so there is nothing wrong with it. The red-haired guy emphasized that doctors, being also people, have the right to proper compensation for their high level of qualification and accumulated experience. The guy expressed a desire to thank the doctor, but not only materially, emphasizing that even words of gratitude can be an important gesture of recognition. The man praised Yichio for his good manners, noting the rarity of such people in modern society. The protagonist suggested giving the doctor a mirror as a souvenir, noting that it was a symbolic gesture. Zhao waved it off and expressed joy at being rid of the mirror, calling it a burden. The young man expressed his gratitude and expressed his suspicion that the mirror might have been hidden by his feud, promising to look into it. The rich man became angry and declared that he would not leave this unattended, expressing his intention to find the culprit and punish him. Yichio proposed to discuss further cooperation with the assembled group, emphasizing their common interests. The green-eyed girl reacted with surprise to this idea, as she had offered Yichio to work at Hung Fu many times but was rejected. The young man explained that he refused to work for others because of his personal principles. The man asked what exactly the protagonist wanted, and he replied that he wanted direct cooperation with their company. Meng Rui noted that acquiring Hung Fu shares could be complicated given the many shareholders. The girl asked Yichio about his plans to start a business from scratch and received an affirmative answer. The beauty asked how the cooperation would be carried out without the young guy having his own business. The protagonist explained that he intended to go into the jewelry business and that their company had enough resources for this. The green-eyed girl asked Ichio about dividing the company's shares, to which the young man suggested a 40-60th option. The white-haired girl noted that the company should own 60% of the shares, given the money invested. Ichio expressed his desire to have 60% of the company's shares, and was even willing to offer up to 51% if the number of shareholders increased. Meng Rui did not agree to such conditions, as it would mean providing him with financial support when he had nothing now. The young man rejected the girl's point of view and noted that he did not intend to accept such an offer. Meng Rui explained that in the jewelry business, initial investment is important, specifying that the starting capital required is 500 million yuan. She could provide him with these funds, but she would consider it unfair, given that the guy refuses to give her 60% of the company's shares. The protagonist reiterated his position, claiming that Meng Rui was risk-free and the more she invested, the more she would get in the end. The green-eyed girl expressed doubts about the guy and suspected him of wanting to deceive her. The red-haired guy emphasized the importance of trust in a joint business and noted that such suspicions are unproductive even at the initial stage of cooperation. Yichio decided to leave, wishing for Uncle Zhao's safety. The guy in the blue shirt smiled and left, and Meng Rui looked at him angrily. The green-eyed girl pointed at the main character and expressed her indignation at his behavior. The man said that he owns the company and chooses his partners. Meng Rui acknowledged that she understood his point of view and asked him to stop. She approached the protagonist and agreed to his proposal, hoping for his satisfaction. The young man noted that he expected Meng Rui to not miss the chance, as she was a very smart girl. Afterwards, they went to the man, who congratulated them on their successful negotiations, declaring an official partnership and entrusting Yichio with taking care of Meng Rui. The protagonist assured that he would take care of Meng Rui and they would be able to earn a lot of money. The action moves to the car, where the guy tells the driver to turn left to take a shortcut. The driver turned left, but bandits were waiting for them, which made him think they were trapped. Men with machetes and bats surrounded the taxis, ordering them to stop, threatening to make the situation worse. Ichio reassured the driver, claiming that these people came for him, not for them. The young man quickly dialed his brother Lei's number, insisting on urgent help and sending his friends, and then he gave his coordinates. The bandit smashed the taxi window and ordered the guy to stop talking on the phone and get out of the car. The red-haired guy got out of the car and asked the bandits who sent them after him. Suddenly, a man approached from behind and tried to attack the main character with a strong kick to the back, but the guy remained on his feet. The protagonist was outraged by the stranger's actions, asking if politeness really meant attacking talkative people. The man said that the hero was too naive, not knowing who sent the bandits after him, and that he would be punished. The bandits intend to turn the young man into an invalid and force him to beg on the streets, admiring the prospects of the protagonist. The young man pushed the man's bat away, insisting that they leave or they would regret it. The stranger warned the guy about the stupidity of his actions and hinted at the possible consequences. The bandits pounced on the protagonist, shouting that he needed to be punished, and the guy stood motionless, preparing to attack. One of the bandits tried to hit him, but the guy avoided the blow, shocking the attacker. The hero then grabbed the man by the throat and pushed him hard to the ground, indicating that he was finished. Another man ran up with a bat, but the protagonist anticipated his attack and struck him down. After the fight, the young man remained standing and the attackers fell. However, the bandit quietly hit the guy on the back with a bat, causing pain, but the guy did not give up. The protagonist responded with a punch to the face, knocking out several of the attacker's teeth. The fight was brutal, but the hero did not give up despite the many attackers. In the end, only the main character remained, who examined the bandits, hoping to find at least one conscious person. Approaching one of the fugitives, the guy threateningly asked who was behind the attack, threatening the hospital. But the bandit warned that revealing the information would lead to the end of the protagonist. Their conversation was interrupted by a red-haired guy who appeared, the brother of one of the bandits who remained conscious, and Dong's brother wanted to take the situation into his own hands and deal with Yichio personally. Dong praised Yichio's fighting skills, noting that the boy had dealt with a crowd of men single-handedly and only received minor scratches himself. Drawing his gun, Dong stated that the weapon had more weight than his arm strength and pointed it at the protagonist, causing him to raise his arms. The red-haired guy ordered the main character to be tied up, loaded into a car, and taken to the place so that he would understand that he was caught for his actions. The action moved to an abandoned building, where the dark bag was removed from Yichio's head, and he recognized the man. It was his rich classmate who greeted Yichio and explained that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, so he decided to meet him. The main character was surprised to recognize his classmate and reminded him that they studied at the same university, and now he had kidnapped him. Wang explained that the boy had embarrassed him at a class reunion and had to pay for it with his health. The red-haired guy asked Wang why he kidnapped Yichio just for this reason, and was told that the rich guy was offended by the protagonist, hurting his pride. Wang came up with two punishments for Yichio, either breaking the guy's limbs or filming him kneeling, apologizing, and hitting himself. Yichio joked that Wang was too lacking in imagination to come up with anything more original. The former classmate replied that this was just the beginning, and tomorrow the main character would be begging on the streets. The bandits approached the red-haired guy with a bat, offering to break his legs or cut them off right away. Suddenly, a man's cry was heard demanding to know who dared to touch his brother, and everyone turned their attention to him. This man was Lei Hu, and the bandits began to feel afraid of him, not understanding why he was there. The red-haired bandit asked what Lei Hu was doing here and why he came. Lei, furiously angry, hit the bandit hard in the face, sending him flying several meters away. Approaching his friend, Lei asked if he was okay and learned that his friend was unharmed, which relieved him. The protagonist assured Lei that he was okay and that he didn't need to worry about him. Lei promised to deal with all the bandits in the abandoned building. The friend walked up to Wang Xiang, grabbed him by the shirt, and harshly expressed his dissatisfaction with how he dared to touch his brother, and the boy began to cry and beg for forgiveness. But Lei's brother did not accept Wang Xiang's apology and slapped him hard on the cheek, causing the boy to cry out in pain and blood flowed from his mouth. Lei went to beat the other bandits, but their resistance was useless, and the boy asked the man to stop. The white-haired man grabbed the red-haired bandit and expressed his indignation, calling Wang Xiang a dumbass who was just getting started. The guy in the suit started to tremble when he heard these words, as he was very afraid of Lei's rage. The man pointed his finger at the guy in the suit and said that he warned Wang Xiang not to harm Yichio, but he still didn't care. Wang Xiang fell to his knees and began to apologize, admitting his guilt to the man, begging him not to kill him. He approached the rich guy and started beating him, then asked for forgiveness for his actions. The rich guy told Yichio that he was his former classmate and suggested that he ask Lei for mercy. Yichio noted that Wang Xiang had recently tried to make him disabled, and now he remembered that they were classmates. The guy in the suit begged for forgiveness, promising to return Jing and give him a lot of money, but asked for mercy. The protagonist untied his hands and said that he did not need money and a girl, and he asked Lei not to kill Wang Xiang, but to let him suffer. Lei smiled and assured Yichio that he knew how to make Wang Xiang remember this day forever. The young man in the shirt decided to leave, and Wang Xiang screamed, asking the man to spare him. The action moves to the hospital, where the main character went to visit his grandfather. The red-haired boy opened the door and walked into his grandfather's room. Guoqing greeted his son and asked him to say hello to his grandfather. Ichio was ashamed of his disdain for his grandfather and explained that he had been too busy lately. Grandfather said that the operation was successful and he was almost recovered, so there was no need to worry about him. Guoqing said that a couple of days ago, specialists came from Qingzhou to help the grandfather and advised him to thank the hospital director. The guy replied that he would thank the director later, but today he would just sit with his grandfather. The father expressed his dissatisfaction and said that the protagonist worked too much, and he offered to sit with his grandfather himself while Yichio rested. The protagonist smiled, took the diary, and assured his father that he would have a good rest here and that he should not worry. His father advised him not to read the Heavenly Dragon technique before going to bed, otherwise he might have strange dreams. The young man smiled and assured his father that he could handle everything himself, so he needed to rest. The action moves to the main office of the Hongfu Company, where the main character is heading. The guard did not let the young guy through and asked where he was going without a pass, and the main character was a little confused. The man explained that without a pass he would not be allowed to proceed further due to the growing number of scammers. The young man asked why he was considered fraud, explaining that he had come to Zhao Mangrue as her guest. The stranger said that if he was her guest, then he was like a member of the family, otherwise he should leave, or he would get hit on the head. The protagonist stated that he was not a member of her family and came specifically to Zhao, otherwise he would have threatened the guard. A strange man approached them, wondering when they had last seen each other and amazed at how much had changed. The red-haired boy waved his hand and noted that it was unworthy to talk to Yang Baoqing. Yin Baoqing noticed that the protagonist was working in a low position and was acting arrogant, and he introduced himself as the director of the 6th Market Department. Jan pointed to himself and warned that the protagonist should respect him. Meng Rui ordered his name to be written down and a request sent to the HR department for dismissal. The man was surprised to learn that they wanted to fire him and asked why Zhao wanted to get rid of him. The director of the 6th department explained that the main character did not know his limits and was rude to the guard, for which they wanted to punish him. Meng Rui ordered all employees in the market department to be fired and blacklisted. She apologized to the protagonist for the behavior of her subordinates. Su Qing ordered them to go to the HR department instead of standing there, and they were shocked that they were about to be fired. Yang Baocheng begged the protagonist for forgiveness and asked that he not be fired from his job, and he promised to do everything possible to make the guy forgive him. Yichio explained that Yang Baocheng was angry at him for the past problems at the branch store, even though he himself was the one who constantly caused him trouble, and yet the protagonist did not respond to his anger. Jan used his connections, did not do the work, and shifted it to others, and therefore the company does not need such an employee. Talented and hard-working employees were passed over for promotions while he became a department head thanks to his connections, and the guy believes that people like him don't deserve a place in the company. The guards took Yang Baocheng away and assured him that he was entitled to severance pay. The action moves to the office, where the girl and the main character are sitting on the couch, and Su Qing brings them tea. The young man stood up and expressed his desire to talk to Su Qing, so he asked her to sit next to him. The green-eyed girl thought the guy was flirting with her assistant in her presence, which made her very angry. Meng Rui didn't approve of guys like Ichio who thought others were stupid because of their talent. She ordered her assistant to sit next to them if the protagonist wanted it that way. Su Qing sat down next to the young man, and Ichi expressed his gratitude to the green-eyed girl for allowing her assistant to take the seat next to them. The red-haired young man stated that there was a chance to make a lot of money and expressed his desire to learn about the structure of Zenju's company, especially its employees, if they had a suitable candidate. The white-haired girl said that she had one candidate who should appear soon. Ichio asked the girl not to reveal the identity of the guy who expressed interest in his identity. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, and Su Qing went to open it, and standing in front of them was an unfamiliar guy. A strange guy approached them, greeted Meng Rui, and asked who was sitting next to her. The girl replied that he was her friend and that he was not connected with their company, so he had nothing to worry about. The green-eyed girl said that this was Mr. Lai Jianhua, who graduated from Harvard Business School, worked for 3 years on Wall Street, and was accepted to an important management position in a prestigious company. The protagonist approached the guy, greeted him, and extended his hand for a handshake, but Lai Jianhua did not respond to the greeting or shake his hand. Meng Rui asked Lai Jianhua if he had been able to develop a business plan for their company. The guy in a red jacket said that he had done it in one night and wanted Meng Rui to evaluate his plan. The white-haired girl took his plan and began to study it, and it turned out to be quite high quality and professional. She asked the protagonist if he would like to take a look at the plan, and Yichio agreed, which caught Lai Jianhua's attention. Lai Jianhua noticed that Yichio didn't have enough knowledge in this area and wondered if there was any point in showing him this plan. Yichio explained that Meng Rui was worried that he might have made a mistake in the plan due to the late timing of its creation, so he wanted to have it checked. The brown-haired boy became annoyed and asked why Yichio thought he had the right to check on him. The red-haired guy began to study the plan and noticed that it made no practical sense. The company employee explained that he had included charts, tables, statistics, and analysis in the plan, used all his knowledge, and wanted to know what he had done wrong. The green-eyed girl thought about it, thinking that the protagonist thought too highly of himself, and now he was at risk of losing face in front of the Harvard graduate, and she was curious how Lai Jianhua would react. The protagonist pointed to the 6th line on the 8th page, which said that they planned to open 13 branches in Zhonghai within a year and capture the market of the entire province within 3 years. Meng Rui was shocked that she couldn't find the serious flaw in Lai Jianhua's plan. Lai Jianhua explained that his plan had no flaws, and by capturing the market, they would be able to increase their sales volume, become a leading enterprise in the market, and continue to develop. Yichio wondered, with his experience at Harvard and Wall Street, why Lai Jianhua chose to apply his knowledge to Zhonghai, where he had just returned and might have forgotten some of the nuances. The brown-haired guy noticed that Lai Jianhua was aiming to rely on the core element to pull up everything else and quickly conquer the market. The red-haired guy was indignant when he mentioned Hongfu, Fuyun, and Funshun, the 3 big companies in the city that controlled most of the market, and he emphasized the problem of unfair competition and monopoly in the city. He continued by noting that the differences between China and America not only exist, but are numerous and cannot be ignored or the company will fail. Meng Rui runs Hongfu Company, so it won't be forced out of the market, but Fuyun and Fuzhong might swallow them up at the first opportunity, given their connections to the mafia and the government. Taking over the entire province's market would be a difficult task, so Yichio had to look for special development strategies, and he took out his business plan and handed it over to the green-eyed girl for her to review. The girl began to study the plan and was amazed at how detailed every aspect was. The white-haired girl handed Lai Jianhua a plan, telling him to judge for himself whose business plan was better. Lai Jianhua looked at the plan and admitted that Yichio's business plan was much better than his own and apologized for his behavior. The main character noted that the guy with brown hair was very smart and talented, but he made a common mistake. The company employee asked what the error was. Yichio explained that this was arrogance and overestimation of his own importance, noting that Lai Jianhua had great potential, but he should admit his mistakes and learn from them. The red-haired guy added that admitting mistakes and learning from them is a valuable experience. The brown-haired boy thanked Yichio for his wise advice. The main character noticed that even he himself cannot always cope with his arrogance. The green-eyed girl introduced Yi Chio as the founder of Shinjue Company. Meng Rui added that the main character is the director of Shinjue. Lai Jianhua apologized and expressed his hope that the protagonist would not be offended by him. The red-haired guy assured that their company would fully trust him as a qualified specialist, and Yi Chio believed in their ability to achieve their goals. They sat down on the sofa, and Yi Chio announced that they had found the main candidate for the general manager position, but there were 2 more candidates, so he wanted them to help him make a decision. Looking at the red-eyed girl, Yi Chio expressed his desire to see Su Qing as the deputy general manager. The red-eyed girl stood up and expressed doubts, thanking Yi Chio for offering her such a position, but doubting that Su Qing could handle it. The main character expressed the opinion that Su Qing underestimates herself, and he would like to hear Meng Rui's opinion on her abilities. Meng Rui noticed that the main character was being too brazen in his interference, considering that he had not yet created the company but was already laying claim to managing its staff. The green-eyed girl supported Su Qing's abilities, claiming that she could handle any position, and Meng Rui also believed in her ability to make adequate decisions. Su Qing has always helped Meng Rui, but the green-eyed girl knows that Yi Chio's proposal opens up new prospects for her, and she must agree. Lai Jianhua raised his hand and expressed his full support for Meng Rui, claiming that she could not make mistakes in selecting personnel. The guy with red hair said that there was another candidate, his former classmate, who was decent and honest, and he planned to invite him for an interview. He stressed that in their work it is important to understand that their choice is not related to friendly relations, but is based on professional skills, so they need to do their job well. Meng Rui assessed the young man's business plan and asked if he had written it. The main character smiled and asked the green-eyed girl if she doubted his abilities. The white-haired girl expressed doubt because the main character had no experience or knowledge in business, and she wanted to know who actually wrote his business plan. Yi Chio claimed that he wrote the business plan himself, but he didn't show off many of his talents for fear that the girl would fall in love with him. The girl angrily replied that she didn't know about his talents, but the main character had a lot of impudence. The red-haired boy expressed his desire to visit the Hungfu Company warehouse and help Meng Rui evaluate all the antiques. The green-eyed girl clarified that the company's antiques are now stored in the main warehouse, which is not easy to access. The young man noticed that Meng Rui was the CEO, so they would definitely be allowed to visit the warehouse. Meng Rui explained that the warehouse contained very valuable items, the value of which exceeded the city's budget, and security was not provided by their company alone, so he could not enter the warehouse as a guest. The protagonist waved his hand and suggested closing this topic if it was causing such problems. The white-haired girl thought for a moment and noticed that she had an idea on how to get into the warehouse. The warehouse security guard has been with the company for over 10 years. During one fire, he risked his life to rescue exhibits from the fire and suffered serious burns. Because of this former feat, Hungfu's management trusts this guard and gave him a copy of the warehouse keys. Yi Chio became interested, noting that the guard's words carried great weight in the warehouse's security system, and they decided to approach him. The green-eyed girl noted that the main character thinks correctly, but there is a problem, and the guard is very silent, and it will be difficult to convince him. The young man is confident that they will be able to persuade him. The scene shifts to the warehouse where the protagonist and Meng Rui headed, and a man with glasses came out of the elevator. They found the warehouse of a large company to be very well maintained and equipped with a good security system, including blast-proof walls. The man standing there recognized Meng Rui, but didn't understand why they had come. The white-haired girl walked up to him, smiled, and thanked the guard for his service. The guard replied that he should thank her for her trust and the opportunity to continue working, and he asked why they had come. The girl smiled and said that she wanted to go to the warehouse with this young man. The security guard replied that the rules did not allow outsiders to enter the warehouse. The girl explained that the boy worked as a gem expert for Mr. Chi, and she wanted to show him the warehouse exhibits for his professional development. The guard noticed that Meng Rui did not present the necessary documents, so they were not allowed to enter. Yichio walked up to the guard and noticed that he was feeling shaky and dizzy. The guard agreed that the guy knew something about medicine, but that was no reason to enter the warehouse. The guard sticks to his principles and warns that he will call security if they do not leave. The guy admires the guard's heroism, but is disappointed by his stubbornness. The main character walked up to the guard and gently sat him down on a chair, surprising the man with his strength and determination. The red-haired young man ordered the guard to sit down, showing confidence, and he felt no fear, convinced that he would not break into the warehouse. And Yichio felt that this man's character was weak. Perhaps even his own children could not stand him. Meng Rui was shocked by these words, and even her father treated this guard well. Yichio walked up behind the man and placed his hand on his back, and the guard was surprised to realize that this young man had already mastered the practice of Qigong. The young man explained that due to the security guard's sedentary lifestyle, his Qi energy circulation was low, and the massage would help with this. The guard was thinking, and the doctors told him about long-term treatment, but this guy managed to alleviate his condition in a matter of seconds. The boy turned to Meng Rui, saying that it was time to leave, and he was powerless here, so he needed to find another way to get into the warehouse. The man approached them and asked them to stop. They decided to listen to what the guard had to say. The protagonist asked what happened, or if the man had any problems that made him stop them. The red-eyed man expressed his gratitude to the protagonist for his help, and he was very grateful. The red-haired guy said that gratitude was not needed, and he simply admired the man's valor and therefore decided to help. The guard said that he didn't like to be in debt to others, but if the guy wanted to get into the warehouse, the man would help him. Ichio replied that he had not helped the man in order to gain access to the warehouse, and the guard did not owe him anything, so he would not go there without the necessary documents. The green-eyed girl offered a temporary pass, and if anything happened, she would take responsibility. The man began to open the folding doors. The boy and girl looked at him while he did it. The young man felt the power of densely saturated energy and began to absorb it, feeling how he became stronger with every second. Meng Rui noted a terrible moldy smell in the warehouse. The guard replied that they had already taken measures to protect it from moisture, but it was still dark and damp inside. The guy entered the warehouse and began to absorb the energy, expressing joy, and the girl and the security guard were amazed by his behavior. The white-haired girl noted that she didn't think the protagonist would like the smell of mold. But his words passed her by. The antique energy was astonishing, and he could not enjoy it even for a month. The red-haired guy expressed his request to the girl, and the warehouse was a great place to improve his skills, and he would like to work as a security guard with that man. The girl asked the guard if he minded, to which the man replied that if Meng Rui didn't mind, then neither did he, and he added that if necessary, he would write a statement about appointing an assistant. The protagonist realized that with a warehouse worker's certificate, he would be able to enter the warehouse at any time. The action moves to the office, where an old man was sitting in a chair smoking a cigar, and he was informed that Meng Rui had brought a new person to the warehouse, and the guard let them through. The blue-haired boy added that Meng Rui ordered the guard to write an application for the appointment of an assistant so that the boy could receive a certificate. The old man smiled and noticed that everything was going as it should, and now Zhao Meng Rui was definitely on top. A day passed, and the protagonist came to the warehouse, and the guard said that Yichio came very early today. Yichio smiled and replied that the man had arrived earlier. The boy was lost in thought, and the guard began to exercise his body to improve his health. The protagonist went to the warehouse and began to absorb the energy of antiques, feeling very good. But he was interrupted by people who wanted to check the antiques in the warehouse, so he had to go outside for a while. The young man asked if it was okay for people from the company to suddenly come here and conduct an inspection. The guard said that checks were necessary, but they were usually warned in advance, and such a sudden invasion of the warehouse was the first time for him. The red-haired guy called Meng Rui and said that someone had come to the warehouse to check, and she knew about it and replied that she would come soon. The white-haired girl headed to the warehouse and asked Jin what was going on here and why their department was conducting an inspection without her permission. Jin replied that their department had the authority to conduct a surprise inspection of the warehouse, so she didn't need to worry so much. The green-eyed girl said that she had not heard that they had such powers, and suddenly a voice came from behind, declaring that it was he who had given them these powers. It was an unfamiliar man in a suit who was smiling. The girl began to get nervous at the sight of him. Suddenly, a security guard came running and asked what Director Jiang was up to, accusing him of stealing. The old man calmly explained that checking the warehouse was a routine procedure, and important items were stored here under the supervision of the department. Meng Rui turned away and said that they could check as much as they wanted, and if he insisted on it, then they had more important things to do and were leaving. 2 hours passed, and the man asked why the inspection was taking so long and what was going on there. Suddenly, people with bats burst into the room, and the man couldn't understand what was happening, and they announced that hundreds of exhibits had disappeared from the warehouse, and they were blaming the two main suspects. The guard claimed that this was impossible because he had been monitoring the warehouse and knew that nothing had disappeared. A company spokesman said that they should not trust the suspect's words and that the company was currently holding a meeting where both the security guard and Yi Qiu had been invited. They were seized and taken to the office. Yi Qiu claimed that he wanted to be released because he was innocent. The action moves to the office, where the old man explained that an unpleasant incident had occurred, but at the same time, it was an important event for the company. The old man reported that during the inspection, the supervision department discovered that more than 100 precious exhibits were missing. Everyone was shocked by this news, and the scale of the loss was enormous. The old people asked how sure they were of this information. The red-eyed man replied that they had lost a huge number of valuable exhibits, with damages estimated at 3 billion yuan. The guard objected that this was impossible because it was simply unrealistic to carry away so much at one time, and he would certainly have noticed such a theft. The director approached him and stated that the results of the supervisory inspection could not be questioned. The bald old man stood up from his seat, smiled, and promised that soon everyone would learn the truth from them. The man stepped forward and stated that Un had been guarding the warehouse for a long time, but things started disappearing immediately after a new guard arrived at the warehouse. He pointed his finger at Yi Qiu and stated that he was the new security guard, and the man didn't understand why Un agreed to hire him, but the protagonist had spent enough time in the warehouse. On the same day, Meng Rui signed the order to hire Yi Qi, and a few days later, more than 100 exhibits disappeared from the warehouse, and the man thought that everything was becoming clear. The woman sitting next to the green-eyed girl asked if it was true that she had hired this young man. The bald old man said that Yi Qiu had managed to steal so many antiques in a couple of days, so let the protagonist tell him where he hid the stolen goods and who was in charge. The main character smiled and said that he would remain silent, and that the director could continue playing theater. The old man replied that the boy's silence only confirmed his guilt. The bald old man walked up to the girl and said that Meng Rui had already become the CEO, but now she seemed to be trying to rob the company, and the shareholders were only getting pennies, and he was disappointed in Meng Rui. The director stated that it was possible that Meng Rui had the motive to rob their warehouse. The man looked at the girl and noticed that the green-eyed girl had founded a new jewelry company with Yi Qiu. The bald old man squealed, and how could Meng Rui, as the CEO, invest in competitors, and this was enough to drive her out of the company. He called for a vote to reprimand Meng Rui from the company, and all the directors raised their hands. At that moment, The man took out his phone to call the police and report Meng's crime. The protagonist tried to stop them, saying that they didn't understand anything and that such people didn't deserve to be directors. The red-haired man ordered the guards to take him away. Ichio looked at the director and stated that their security had no right to detain him. The red-haired director walked up to Ichio and accused them of collusion and theft. The red-haired guy clarified that there should be surveillance cameras in the warehouse, so it would be possible to check what was actually happening. The young man asked the green-eyed girl if the company hired people without an education, claiming that the people from the supervision department had not even finished elementary school. The old man asked Ichio if they weren't the ones who stole the antiques, then who could have done it? The guy explained that the last check was 20 days ago, and after his arrival, they decided to conduct another check. The bald old man claimed that Ichio would not have the opportunity to refute the accusations. He added that the company had suffered huge losses due to the theft of the antiques, and that the directors agreed with him. The protagonist asked who said that Meng Rui opened a company with him for her own enrichment. Ichio stated that Meng Rui had persuaded him to join Hungfu Company, but he only agreed to work with them after opening his own company. The young man added that he even demanded a majority of the shares and decision-making rights for himself, but Meng Rui was cooperating with him for the sake of Hungfu Company, not for personal gain. The woman asked the green-eyed girl if it was all true or if the young man was lying. The girl confirmed Yi Chio's words and realized that the protagonist had sacrificed her profits for the common good. The bald old man asked who Yi Chio was to cooperate with, especially considering that most of the shares remained in his hands. The white-haired girl replied that Yi Chio had a special talent and understood precious stones better than she. She also added that Meng Rui believes that none of those present want to give up their shares. The red-haired guy said that they would definitely not invest in his company, so he asked Meng Rui for shares and a large percentage of the profits for himself. The red-haired man pointed out that Yi Chio, even though he was so capable, could not make decisions on his own and had to consult with the board of directors. The green-eyed girl clarified that she herself can make decisions on projects worth less than 500,000 yuan, according to the collective agreement. The directors began to talk among themselves, and the woman with red hair apologized to the girl, taking back her previous words. The old man told the directors to calm down. The damage to the company still rests on Meng Rui's shoulders. Ichio suggested returning all the antiques back to the warehouse to resolve the situation. The bald old man expressed doubts about this, suggesting that Ichio might simply confess to the crime. The young man warned the old man that if he got angry, he would not care who he was. The red-haired director stated that if the antiques were found within 3 days, Meng Rui would no longer be held accountable. The main character stated that he did not need 3 days to find the stolen things. The directors didn't believe it was possible, but Ichio insisted that they follow him to the warehouse. All the directors went to the warehouse with Ichio, where the old man asked if the protagonist doubted the results of the inspection. The young man replied that the problem was not in the audit, but in the selection of directors who, in his opinion, did not have sufficient education. The white-haired girl approached the main character and asked what he was going to do. The red-haired boy assured her that Ichio would return everything that was stolen and that she had nothing to worry about. Ichio requested a shovel, a hammer, and other tools, as well as 10 volunteers. After providing the tools and workers, Ichio asked them to work carefully so as not to damage the valuable items. When they approached the wall, the main characters said that they needed to break this wall and they needed to hurry. The bald old man asked again what exactly the main character was going to do. The protagonist explained that he was looking for stolen antiques, and 3 billion yuan was more important than this wall, and he assured the old man that he and Meng Rui would compensate for the damage if the wall was damaged. The old man expressed concern that the broken wall could damage the entire building and asked what would happen if the antique was damaged instead of the wall. The young man turned to the old man and asked a question. If director Jiang insisted on not breaking down the wall, then perhaps he was the one who hid the antiques there. Jiang became nervous and said that he would sue Yi Qiu for slander. Yi Qiu smiled and replied that it was a joke, but Jiang had already slandered him many times, and it was impossible to even make fun of him. The main character prepared to start hitting the wall and asked everyone to step back. The red-haired guy took a hammer and hit the wall several times. The green-eyed girl thought about how Yi Qiu had surprised her many times before, and she began to wonder where he got his mysteriousness from. The main character broke through the wall and ordered everyone to follow him. They came out from behind the wall of antiques, and the director asked why so many antiques were hidden behind the wall. At this moment, Qi came and asked what was going on and why Meng Rui had been called. Meng Rui told Qi to look at the antiques and determine whether they were stolen items from their company or not, leaving the old man confused. The white-haired girl explained to Qi what had happened, and the old man began to examine the antiques. Qi told Meng Rui to tighten the warehouse's security to prevent such a thing from happening again, and confirmed the authenticity of the antiques. The green-eyed girl assured him that this would not happen again. The girl approached the directors with Qi and declared that they would find the thief and Meng Rui would punish him severely. The red-haired boy reminded them that Jiang had tried to dissuade them from breaking the wall, despite his previous words. The bald old man pointed his finger at the protagonist and said that he had warned him about a possible lawsuit for slander. Yi Qiu reassured the old man, saying that these were just his guesses, and that they were all cultured people, so they wouldn't blindly blame each other, and he added that they weren't fools. The red-haired man said that Yi Qiu cleverly concealed the fact that he himself was the main suspect and blamed the protagonist. The protagonist replied that only fools blindly blame other people, and so the man admitted that he was a fool. The man rejected this argument, insisting that Yi Qiu was the one suspected by him, and he asked how the protagonist knew about the secret room, implying that it couldn't be a simple coincidence. The young man explained that he had assumed he would be asked about this, and had therefore approached the security guard, Un, for a map of the premises in advance. After being given the map, he pointed to it, showing where the secret room was. The security at the warehouse was well organized, and no outsider could have carried away so many things, and this confirmed that the antiques were hidden in a secret room. The guy also noted that access to the warehouse is limited, and CCTV cameras monitor the corridor, making it impossible for outsiders to enter during the day. In the evening, the elevator is turned off and the warehouse is locked, so only a few people have the keys, and Yi Qiu concluded that they all understand who could get into the warehouse. Meng Rui suggested keeping the incident a secret to avoid a scandal, and she warned that if any of the directors spoke out, they would be fired. The green-eyed girl asked Su Qing to send a letter on her behalf to the department and ask all witnesses to remain silent. The white-haired girl expressed gratitude to the main character for his help. Yi Qiu asked why Meng Rui was so polite to him, noting that they were family. The girl asked the young man if he knew about the secret room from the very beginning. The red-haired guy replied that these were just his guesses and he could not have known about it in advance. The white-haired girl asked if the protagonist would stay in the warehouse to study the antiques. Meng Rui announced that she had things to do and would no longer distract the protagonist. The security guard thanked the young man and expressed his appreciation for his help. Yi Qiu stated that the man shouldn't say that and that they should have framed Meng Rui, not him, and he demanded that the man apologize to him. The scene shifts to another company, where rumors have reached about a conflict in Hungfu and the disappearance of valuables from the warehouse. The red-haired man noticed that Director Jiang was trying to move Meng Rui out of his way, but Yi Qiu stopped him. Liu expressed surprise, noting that he did not expect Yi Qiu to have such abilities, and said that he could become an excellent detective. The man noted that the main character is very stubborn and will not agree to work with them. The protagonist suggested making it so that competitors could not use Ichio. He said that Ichio was a legend in the business world and was famous for his exploits, and he once single-handedly took on a drug cartel's hideout and killed its baron, and Liu said that he would not interfere, allowing Ichio to act on his own. The purple-haired boy said that there would be a meeting at Dobao soon, and they needed a leader. The action moves to a warehouse where the protagonist was meditating and reflecting on the difficulties of cultivating techniques. He absorbed a huge amount of energy from the antiques, but could not make progress. The guard reminded the protagonist that his shift was over, to which he replied that he would be leaving soon. They said goodbye, and the main character decided to take a taxi. The red-haired guy was looking for a taxi, and the main character approached the driver. The guy was pleased with his work, and the driver watched him closely through the rearview mirror. Ichio felt the bloodthirsty aura and turned his attention to the driver, but the driver stopped looking at him. The main character decided that his fatigue was leading to hallucinations, and he needed rest. He decided to do a few minutes of meditation for quick recovery. The protagonist noticed that the driver went the wrong way and felt that something was wrong. The driver pulled out a gun and ordered the protagonist to remain motionless, threatening to kill him. The red-haired guy asked who hired the driver to kill him. The man smiled and noted that the victims always asked the same questions. The guy decided that if he died, he didn't care and asked the killer to just get him out of the car. They got out of the car, and Ichio asked if this man was a hired killer, how much he was paid, and if he let the guy go, the protagonist would pay him double. The killer smiled and replied that the guy's words had offended him. He had his own rules and principles in his work, and he wanted to interrogate Ichio before killing him. The young man asked why he hadn't started yet, or killed him in the car. The stranger replied that he saw something unusual in the guy. When Ichio was in the car, he felt his aggression. An ordinary person does not have such abilities. He hadn't met such talented people for a long time. The killer offered the main character to fight, and if he agreed, the man would kill him quickly and painlessly. The guy asked what if he won. The man replied that if the main character defeats him, then he can kill him, but he doubts that the guy can. The red-haired guy said that if the man considered him a worthy opponent and was so confident in himself, then he should put the gun away. The killer walked up to his car, put the gun on the driver's seat, and asked the protagonist if he was happy now. Ichio immediately attacked the man. He wanted to finish the fight and return home. The stranger was experienced and evaded the protagonist's attack, noticing that Ichio was quickly approaching him. The protagonist kicked the man hard, but he blocked the blow again. The man smiled and said that the boy was very strong, introducing himself as Joie and noting that it was the first time he had seen a person who could resist him. Joie decided to show his strength and attacked, but the protagonist dodged. The killer's second blow hit the boy's face, causing bleeding. Ichio didn't expect such force. The killer kicked the guy in the stomach, and he flew back, seriously injured. The red-haired guy noticed that the man was not going to stop and shouted that this blow would be the last one. Ichio calmed down and concentrated his strength, deciding to fight with all his might. The boy dodged Joie's punch and responded with an elbow to the man's stomach, causing pain. Joie flew back and fell, blood flowing from his mouth. He didn't expect such a strong blow. The protagonist approached him and said that the man was strong, but now he was unable to do anything to him, and asked who hired him. Joie stood up and was about to strike the protagonist, and Ichio was amazed by his fearlessness, seeing that he was ready to continue the fight even now. But the young man avoided the blow and counterattacked, hitting the killer in the stomach, and then he warned, if he did not tell the truth, death awaits him. The killer fell to the ground and told the protagonist to finish him off, refusing to give out information. The young man had not expected such stubborn resilience from Joie, and he realized that the murder would attract the attention of the police, which was absolutely not what he needed right now. Ichio tied up the killer and assured him that he would not kill him, and he announced that he would soon receive free shelter and food so that Zhu would no longer have to kill to survive. The guy took out his mobile phone and dialed the police, stunning the killer with his decision to call law enforcement. The action moves to a hospital, where the protagonist is in a doctor's office, and a man asks if he received these wounds recently, and the guy confirms that it was only a couple of hours. The doctor was shocked, and usually such wounds take weeks to heal, but these were almost healed, and it was unusually fast. The protagonist thinks, and apparently his body reacts to the techniques of the heavenly dragon, accelerating the healing process. The action moves to Lu's house, who is sitting on his bed when his phone suddenly rings. Lu picks up the phone and asks what happened. The other guy tells him that their killer has been captured by the police. The purple-haired guy was surprised, and Zhu was a professional who didn't even kill Yichio, and now he was already caught. The interlocutor admits that he does not know how this happened and advises Lu to get him out of prison as soon as possible to avoid problems. The guy replies that it is not that simple. He has no connections in the police, and it is better for him to leave the country for a while. The red-haired man objects, pointing out that his entire family is here, and if he is accused, he won't be able to return, and Lu agrees that trying to bail him out might only make things worse. They remain silent, and Lu wonders how Yichio was able to deal with a professional killer. The scene shifts to a hospital, where the protagonist hears someone calling a woman names and threatening to beat her. Yichio enters the room and sees a woman standing behind a man, asking him for help, threatening that otherwise she would be beaten. The fat man replies that it is useless for her to ask for help. He demands that she return the money immediately, or she will suffer. The woman begs Kun to give her more time, as she has no money now. The main character enters the room and asks what is going on here, attracting everyone's attention with his appearance. The woman runs to Yichio and begs him to save her, claiming that she has no way out and is in trouble. Kun orders Yichio to leave, but Yichio approaches him and offers to solve the problem directly. The man claims that his aunt owes him 1,000,000 yuan and offers the protagonist to pay for her if he wants to help. The red-haired guy asks his aunt if it's true that she owes him 1,000,000, and the woman replies that she only needs 50,000. The fat man insists on his money, but Yichio offers to return 100,000 yuan to him. The short man warns that the protagonist does not know who he is dealing with, and it is better not to mess with them. The main character asks the fat man what they're going to do: rob and beat them up simply. The man threatens that the guy doesn't understand who he's dealing with and orders his guys to attack Yichio. Guaqing wants to intervene, but the young man tells his father to step aside, stating that he can easily deal with them now. The main character is attacked by two guys, but he sees them as weak opponents, just bandits. He easily defeats them, and they can no longer continue to fight against him. Yichio's father is surprised by his kung fu skills, and the fat man begins to worry about his health. Yichio asks the fat man what happened to him, and if he wants to discuss it now. The young man claims that Kun has inflated the interest rate on the debt, but they are willing to return 100,000 yuan to him. The fat man begins to tremble and warns that the guy does not understand the consequences of his actions. The protagonist states that he does not care about the threats, and that Kun is no more influential than Lei Hu. Kun is surprised and asks if the protagonist is working for him, and Yichio explains that he's his new brother. The short man claims he hasn't heard about Lei having a new brother and advises the boy not to lie, and Yichio waves him off and tells him to find out for himself. The man orders his men to stand up. They leave, but warns that if the protagonist deceived him, he will not escape punishment. When the men left the room, the boy's relatives, who were walking down the hospital corridor, noticed this. They entered the room, and the uncle expressed surprise, saying that he knew this man and an important figure in the mafia with a large gang. The young man noted that they attacked him, and his brother asked why he did that, since now they could be killed. The guy assured his relatives that they had nothing more to worry about, and that these people would not bother them anymore. The relative warned that the protagonist was underestimating them too much, and if they found out that Ichio was cooperating with Hung Fu, he might have problems at work. The uncle told the young man that his character was too lively and warned him of the possible consequences of their actions, so Ichio should apologize to them. The protagonist Anne explained that when Hui should not blame Ichio, since she took out the debt and the guy only helped her avoid trouble. Suddenly, Kuin and his men entered the room, causing fear among the relatives. Ichio's brother ordered him to apologize to those people. Uncle said that they wanted to apologize to them, although their relative did not agree with it. The fat man approached the main character, bowed, and asked for forgiveness for his actions and behavior. The relatives were surprised, not expecting Ichio to be such an influential person in the mafia. Now Kuin knows who Ichio is and wants to avoid conflict with him after clearing things up and realizing that they attacked the wrong person. Ichio asked about his aunt's debt, and the fat man replied that he didn't need to pay it back and didn't have to worry. Kuin took out a bag of money and offered to take his compensation. The protagonist refused, saying that he didn't need the money. The fat man offered to bring more money if 100,000 wasn't enough. The guy forgave Kuin and asked him to keep the money for himself, since he didn't need it. The young man asked for the fat man's car number to pay back his aunt's debt, but Kuin refused. The red-haired guy stated that debts always had to be repaid and the guy shouldn't worry, because it was his money. The fat man expressed admiration for the protagonist's honesty and apologized for the panic of his relatives. Ichio's grandfather expressed his surprise and admitted that he didn't expect the boy to become such an influential person in society. Ichio ran to his grandfather and told him not to be nervous anymore because the protagonist was very worried about him. The old man replied that the main character had become so successful that even the mafia was afraid of him, but he strictly adhered to the law. The protagonist smiled and assured that he knew how to control the situation and the mafia would no longer bother them. The young man looked at his aunt and asked her not to borrow money from the mafia anymore, and if she had any problems, to be sure to call him. Auntie thanked Ichio and admitted that she had greatly underestimated the guy. The action moves to the hospital, where the main character picked up the phone, and someone told him that the person who ordered the murder was a man named Lu Xian. The red-haired boy asked who Lu Xian was and why he was reporting this, but the other boy cut the conversation short, implying that this was the first time Lu Xian had been so radical against them. Ichio called Meng Rui and asked if she was free, and the green-eyed girl asked if the call was about personal matters or company matters. The young man explained that the call was about the company's business, as they had recently established it, and they needed to choose a good product, and Ichio knew where to go, so he invited the girl to go with him. The green-eyed girl asked where they were going to get the goods, and the guy replied that they were going to Fuyun. The red-haired guy said that Meng Rui was wary of Lu Xian, but she could avoid him, and the guy also needed 500,000 yuan, so the girl had to hand it over to Ichio. Meng Rui stated that she was not afraid of Lu Xian and did not consider him a threat, so she would immediately send a driver to the protagonist. The protagonist smiled and declined the offer, saying that it was not required and that he would rather meet at the Fuyun Company's transaction site, and the green-eyed girl agreed. The action moves to the company, where the girl noticed that the stone company has practically monopolized the market, and even the unification of Zhongfu and Hungfu will not be able to surpass Fuyun. When they met the main character, the guy expressed surprise that they arrived so quickly. The action moves to the Fuyun Company office, where a man came to Lu Xian and told him that Meng Rui was in the stone dealing area. Lu Xian turned to the newcomer and asked if she came alone or with someone. The guy came up and handed him his phone, clarifying that there were two more people next to the green-eyed girl. The purple-haired boy picked up the phone and looked at it and saw Ichio, noticing that a new batch of stones had just arrived, and he was afraid that the girl had noticed it. The owner of the company said that he would go there immediately to check what they were up to. The action moves to the building of the Hongfu Company, where the main character noted the successful activities of this company. The green-eyed girl noticed that there were unusually many people here today due to the recent delivery of a new batch of stones. The young man approached the stones, pointed to one of them, and expressed a desire to purchase it. A stranger approached them and said that this particular stone was needed and was ready to pay 5 times more for it. The seller agreed to sell the stone to anyone willing to pay more. The man approached Yichio and offered to pay a higher price for the stone as well. Yichio smiled and agreed to give the stone to the man. People gathered to watch the stone being processed, and the white-haired girl reported that the man knew about the protagonist and his abilities. The red-haired guy answered the green-eyed girl that the man was just an employee of the company. Meng Rui stated that Lu Xian definitely knew about their presence here and sent this person to stop them from buying the stones. Now Yichio will be unable to do anything. At this time, the man called Director Lu and reported the fulfillment of their instructions, noting the success of the first deal. Lu Xian ordered them to be monitored and prevented from purchasing good stones. The red-haired guy pointed to the stone and expressed a desire to buy it, which was watched by the man in the blue jacket. The stranger said he was ready to pay 5 times more for the stone, explaining that he really needed it. The seller began to process the stone, and observers noticed that they had again found a precious stone, noting the excellent quality of the stones from the Fuyun Company. The boy whispered to Meng Rui to move to the side, acting very carefully. They headed off to the side, and the young man was surprised that the man didn't follow them. The main character ran up to the seller and quickly showed with his fingers which stones he needed. But the man intervened, saying that he wanted exactly the stones that the young man had chosen, and he was willing to pay 20,000 yuan for them. Yichio offered to pay another 10,000 on top, but the man smiled and said that he would still pay more than what the guy was offering. The young man became annoyed and asked the man if he should deliberately prevent him from buying the stones. The man replied that it was just fair competition, nothing personal, he just had more money than Yichio. The red-haired guy announced that they would now find out what real fair competition was and ordered the girls to leave. They ran, and the man told the seller to continue selling stones until he returned. The protagonist told the girls that they needed to leave quickly to get away from this man, and then quickly buy good stones. The boy ran up to the seller and demanded that he sell them the stones he was pointing at. The green-eyed girl started laughing and said that the situation of buying stones had never been so funny, and she wouldn't believe it if Meng Rui told him. Ichio said that this competitor motivated him to work even better and ordered the salesman to hurry because he didn't have time. But suddenly a man came running and asked the saleswoman to wait a little, as he would pay twice as much. The young man grabbed the man by the shirt and said that he was against him and Yi Chio was going to hit him now. The girls tried to calm the main character down so that there would be no problems, but he was very angry and wanted to beat the man. The man warned Ichio not to touch him, or he would call the police or security, which made the guy even more angry. The protagonist pushed the stranger away and said that he would not touch him for now, so he could do whatever he wanted. He turned around and said that the man was very tired, so they needed to take advantage of this and buy as many stones as possible. The girls and the boy ran again, which the stranger noticed and ordered the seller to continue selling stones until he caught up with them. They stopped, and the protagonist asked the green-eyed girl if she could see him. Meng Rui pointed her finger and asked the guy to look. On that side sat a man who could no longer run after the young man, and he felt very bad. Ichio smiled and noticed that the man regretted his decision to compete with him in running, but they had to run further. A young guy came and pointed his finger at the stones he wanted to buy, and the girls just watched. The saleswoman said that the main character chose stones worth 6,300,000 yuan. The protagonist waved his hand and stated that he was going to pay everything by card, and then he asked if there were any documents that needed to be signed. Meng Rui assured Yichio that there was no need to worry, and the man was so tired that he could barely stand, and those stones were definitely theirs. Suddenly another man approached them and announced that he was ready to pay $8 million for all the stones the guy had chosen. The man smiled, thanked the guy, and said that thanks to the main character, he would now become a millionaire. The red-haired guy said that it was time to leave here, and he was very unhappy with Hung Fu's company. The stranger suggested that they take their time leaving, and he had not yet fully thanked Yi Chio and was willing to pay the guy 200 yuan for his efforts. The guy agreed that they were ready to leave, and the man said that he was now richer than before, laughing. The stones were brought in, and the man wanted to cut them on the spot, and many people gathered around, surprised that he had bought so many stones at one time. The guy walked up to them and said that director Meng Rui had taken the time to come here, and they looked at him. The green-eyed girl replied that she didn't have much time, but she could see that the guy was good at managing employees. Lu Xian asked if they had come here secretly to learn from him, and added that if the girl wanted, he could only teach her in private. The girl stated that she had already gained the experience she needed today, so she had nothing more to learn from him. The purple-haired boy said that she won the verbal duel, but thanks to her, he chose the best stones, and Lu Xian thanked them for the easy profit. Meng Rui asked him why he thought she helped him make money, after which the girl asked the guy who had just woken up. The protagonist declared that director Lu thought that he was so stupid that he would not find out about his plans, and he was only paid 200 yuan to find stones, and he believed that for that kind of money he would have tried hard. Director Lu realized the situation and went to the stones his assistant bought, and he heard from people that all the stones were fake. The boys walked up to Yi Chio and reminded him to think about the feelings of the one who bought all this, and then they laughed. The guy's friend said that all of those men's stones were fakes, and they decided to end the discussion and look at the rest of the stones. The red-haired guy suggested that perhaps there were no good stones here at all, since 34 had already turned out to be fakes, and could all the stones here really be fakes? The young man shouted to attract attention and said that it was said before that the Fuyun company only had good stones, but that was not true, and he heard that there were no such cases in the Hung Fu company. Lu Xian became angry and realized that the protagonist was trying to set people against his company. Yi Chio screamed, accusing director Lu of threatening him for speaking the truth, and he refused to buy the stones from him and chose to turn to Hung Fu instead. The people left, and Lu Xian approached the protagonist, warning him to walk carefully on the streets of Zhonghai City. The protagonist replied that one of his friends was currently in the police station, and he was confident, and Lu Xian warned that they would see who would be in the worst situation. The green-eyed girl noticed that they had long been enemies of Lu Company, and the size of their companies was huge, and they did little harm to each other, and she had long wanted to punish Lu Xian. The red-haired guy noticed that now he had a chance to finish off Lu, and if he now became an enemy of director Lu, then his company was in danger of ending. The guy went to work, saying that he needed to collect as much goods as possible. The action moves to the street, where the main character helped loaders unload stones from trailer. Meng Rui looked at Su Qing and asked why this batch only contained emerald stones. Yi Chio replied that there were various types of stones here, and he had only selected the best stones, leaving behind those that were not worth the trouble. The white-haired girl waved her hand, noting that the reputation of Fuyun Company had been greatly damaged. A young man who was tired of unloading a trailer of rocks was approached by a red-eyed girl who told Yi Chio to let the workers do their job, since the protagonist was better at unloading rocks than them. The red-haired guy claimed that he knew the secrets of tempering the body and was therefore stronger than these workers, and Yi Chio promised to show the girls his secret method at some point. Su Qing was embarrassed by the protagonist's words, and the white-haired girl became angry. The purple-haired guy with his guards suddenly approached them and asked them to wait a little. The protagonist noticed that director Lu couldn't beat him, so he decided to steal all the goods. Lu Xian replied that he had another thought and that there was a casino nearby, and he invited them to play with him there. Yi Chio agreed to director Lu's proposal, not rejecting the opportunity. The green-eyed girl approached the protagonist and noticed that Lu Xian was making insidious plans and Yi Qiu was falling into a trap. The guy smiled and turned to the girl, assuring her that he had a plan. After that, they went to get Lu Xian, and the white-haired girl said that if Yi Qiu was so passionate, then she would control him, and Meng Rui would only give him 1,000,000 yuan. The red-haired guy replied that the girl didn't need to worry. He had nothing to gain from her. He already had his own 1,000,000 yuan. The action moved to the casino, where they joined Lu Xian, who invited them to take their seats. Meng Rui announced that she couldn't act, so the main character would play the role instead. Lu Xian agreed and asked the protagonist what they would play today. Ichio suggested playing dice if director Lu didn't mind, as it was the easiest game. They started playing at the table, and the purple-haired guy announced that if everyone was ready, they would start playing dice. The protagonist stated that he wanted to change the dice because he didn't trust them, especially after the previous incident with buying stones. Su Qing bought new bones, and the protagonist thanked her for it. The red-haired guy suggested handing the dice to Lu Xian, and if there were no objections, they could start the game. The purple-haired guy didn't check the dice and took the main character's word for it, so he suggested starting the game. The croupier began to shake the cup and placed it on the table. It was time to place bets. Yichio looked at director Lu Xian, smiled, and announced that he would bet 10,000 yuan on winning. When the dealer opened the cup, the result was not high, and Lu Xian said that he was unlucky. The protagonist told Lu Xian not to jump to conclusions. The game had just begun, and they still had a long way to go. The purple-haired boy smiled and asked Ichio if he would like to bet 1,000,000 yuan to make the game more interesting. The red-haired guy thought and remained silent, to which Lu Xian smiled and asked why he was so quiet, whether he was not worthy of being called a man. The young man asked how Lu Xian could think of winning after one game, and offered to bet 1,000,000 if he was so confident. The white-haired girl touched Yi Chio's shoulder and told him to remain calm and cool in the game. The guy told the green-eyed girl not to touch him. He was fine, which surprised her. Meng Rui got angry and asked why the protagonist was acting like this. Excitement had taken hold of him, but he would soon lose everything, and then the girl would scold him. After some time, the main character lost again, and the red-haired guy could not understand how this was possible. Lu Xian looked at the guy and said that he had already lost 1,010,000, so he could lend him some money. Ichio got angry and said that he had his own money, and a red-eyed girl came to him and insisted that he stop playing. It was not worth losing even more. The main character replied that the girls should not touch him. He would win, and the guy bet another 1,000,000 on a smaller number. When the dice came up, the number was high, and Lu Xian said that the boy had lost for the third time, and then laughed. The red-haired boy shouted that Lu Xian was a liar. It was simply impossible. The purple-haired guy said that his girlfriend bought the dice. Yichio can't just accept defeat. The protagonist said that they will continue to play. Lu Xian said that the protagonist had already lost 2,000,000, but he still wanted to play, and how could he know that he had that kind of money? The green-eyed girl said that their company would pay for the amount that Yichio lost and asked them to leave. The young man said that he didn't need her help. She thought he had no money, and after that he bet 10,000,000, and if he didn't have enough money, he promised to cut off his hand. Director Lu asked the boy how he thought his arm was worth 10,000,000, and if he lost he would cut off all his limbs. Yichio agreed to the deal, and was pushed by a green-eyed girl who told him he was crazy. The guy said that if he lost, he would become disabled, but if he won, Lu Xian might simply not pay him the money. The purple-haired boy replied that he believed that Lu Xian would not repay the debt, so he asked his men to bring him a check. He put the check on the table and said that now the main character need not worry. The protagonist said that he would accept a bet of 10,000,000 and subtract from it the amount he lost, and then he bet on the majority. The dealer lifted the cup, and there were 3 sixes, and the main character won this bet and received 10,000,000. Lu Xian got angry, pointed his finger at the guy, and said that all this time Ichio was just deceiving him. He was a real liar. At the director Lu's cries, the guards came running and surrounded the main character, but he sat and waited for them to approach him. The purple-haired guy ordered the guards to disfigure the protagonist, and they pounced on Ichio. But the red-haired guy easily dealt with them and explained that the casino belonged to him. The workers were also his, and the dice were bought in a small store, and how he could cheat his own casino. Ichio leaned towards Lu Xian and accused him of deceiving him, noting that Lu Xian himself had spent his entire life deceiving others. The protagonist grabbed Lu Xian by the neck and warned him not to even think that Ichio didn't know who sent the killer after him, and Lu Xian begged him to let him go. The young man told Lu Xian to listen to him and warned him that if he tried anything against him again, the punishment would be severe. After that, they left the casino, and the green-eyed girl could not understand what happened between them. She approached the guy and offered to hire a bodyguard for him for safety, and she thought it would be better. The young man smiled and said that such security measures were not necessary. He had already seen how he dealt with the guards, and this showed that Ichio was not afraid of anyone. Meng Rui approached the protagonist and warned him that manliness would be of little use if his enemies had weapons. The red-haired guy agreed with the white-haired girl and thanked her for her concern. The scenes then take place in a casino, where Lu Xian gives orders to kill Ichio, offering a reward for it. A little time passed, and the main character, standing near the car, decided that it would be better for them to go by metro. The girls didn't understand why, and Ichio explained that it was for their safety to avoid any possible problems with Lu Xian. The white-haired girl said that she didn't have cash, but the main character assured that he would pay for it. He asked the driver to open all the windows when he returned to the company to avoid being attacked. The action moves to the office of the Hungfu Company, where Meng Rui invited the main character. The green-eyed girl asked Su Qing to bring two men who were former Secret Service agents and were willing to start working as security guards for the main character. Su Qing introduced the men, and they agreed to start work the next day. The boy thanked Meng Rui and greeted the new guards, expressing his willingness to cooperate. Meng Rui said the company would provide him with his own car, and they were waiting for the paperwork to be completed. The events then take place in a hospital, where a young man came to pick up his grandfather. After that, they got into the car and left the place, and the grandfather expressed his pride in his grandson for his good car. However, the old man noticed that they were heading in the wrong direction. Their house was in a different area, and the main character expressed a desire to find a new home. Grandfather noted that currently housing prices in the city are very high, and therefore they are heading to the center, where buying an apartment will be a difficult task. The old man knew that the protagonist was making enough money, but he urged him not to waste it, suggesting that he consider options on the outskirts. Confident in his plans, the grandfather smiled and assured that life in the city center was much more convenient. They got out of the car, and the grandfather asked the driver to stay and wait for them, as he felt there was no need for him to accompany them. Arriving in a residential area, they noticed a security guard approaching them. The guard demanded that they stop and find out who allowed them to enter, and the protagonist asked in surprise if entry was prohibited here if they wanted to buy real estate. The guard expressed doubts about their ability to purchase anything here, which caused the protagonist's displeasure. The red-haired guy pointed at Ichio and asked why he thought he was incapable of buying a house. He noticed that the security guard had not taken into account the fact that they had just parked and asked the driver to wait. The man mocked and urged the guy to leave, but the protagonist was outraged by his attitude. But my grandfather and father advised me to ignore the guard and continue looking for a new home. The security guard grabbed the main character by the shirt and said that he didn't understand that he wasn't allowed in there. In response, the protagonist demanded that he be released, threatening physical violence. The security guard, in turn, expressed anger and threatened the guy. Ichio intervened, grabbed the guard's arm, and punched him, causing him to fall. The young man tried to attack the security guard, but his grandfather and father prevented him from doing so. Several more security guards came onto the stage, asking the young man questions about his actions. At this time, an unfamiliar girl appeared and exclaimed about what was happening, and the guard explained that there was an incident with Ichio, who was also attacked. The red-haired guy let the guard go and said that guards were incapable of thinking and he had come by the house. The girl noted that they do not have any inexpensive houses in stock. The most affordable ones start at $10 million, and they are busy and do not have time to serve those who are simply interested. The worker assumed that the main character did not have significant resources, judging him by his appearance. She ordered security to post a notice that they only serve clients with a budget of at least $5 million and demanded that the main character be removed. The red-haired boy noted that they shouldn't try to do that when someone suddenly asked what was going on here. Director Sue intervened, asking about the disorder and noise in the store. The girl assured him that it was just a bad visitor, that she would deal with him now. At this time, Mao Tse approached the main character, asking if he had come by a house. The protagonist recognized the monk he had saved in Zhao's house and said that was an amazing coincidence to meet here. The young man introduced Mao Tse to his relatives and explained that they had come to buy a house. Director Su and the worker were shocked that Mao Jian knew this guy, and the red-haired guy with green hair claimed that the security tried to beat them up and throw them out. Mao Tse was outraged when he learned that the security guards were throwing out customers and asked why they didn't care about business. Su Liang was frightened and asked for forgiveness, promising to explain everything so that she would not be fired. The man asked the girl to simply apologize to Mao and Yi Qiu without any explanation. The girl bowed, apologized, and said that she was guilty and hoped for forgiveness. Yi Qiu said that the apology was unnecessary and there was no need to worry. He explained that people should not be judged by their appearance, and that if his company had such employees, he would fire them immediately. The blue-eyed man asked why they were getting so much money and criticized Su Liang for her judgments of others. The employee began to worry, admitting that this was the culture at her previous job and that this was how she was trained. The red-haired guy asked what field she worked in before and who trains people for such terrible service and behavior. Su Liang replied that she worked in the luxury merchandise industry, offering high-end cosmetics and clothing from brands like Prada and Gucci. The protagonist decided to ask if these were really those awful brands that the middle class buys to show off, and the girl calls it luxury. Director Su interrupted the conversation, announced that she was fired, and ordered Su Liang to leave the premises. The girl fell to her knees, declaring that she was at fault but begging him not to fire her, and Su Liang began to apologize. The man ordered the guards to take her away and then apologized to Yi Qiu and Mao Jie, assuring that such behavior would not happen again. Yi Qiu stated that he didn't feel guilty because it was the recruitment department that had chosen the employees poorly and he didn't need to apologize to them. Su Liang offered to show the houses as a token of apology, asking Yi Qiu which villa he wanted to buy, promising to give it as compensation. The young man thanked Director Su for his kindness, but declined such generous compensation, limiting himself to a 5% discount. The blue-eyed man assured them that as their dear guests, they would be given a good discount. After that, they went to inspect the villa, and the main character felt a special energy around the house. Mao Jie asked for his opinion of the villa, to which Yi Qiu replied with a smile that it was simply a wonderful place. The red-haired guy pointed at the house and asked Director Su how much the villa cost, expressing his admiration. Su Liang asked her assistant to find out the price of the villa. He replied that it was $15 million and was built in a European style. The protagonist expressed his satisfaction and interest in further inspection of the interior of the villa. As they walked inside, Yi Qiu began to absorb the energy of the house, and the girl reported that it had undergone European-style renovations using environmentally friendly materials. The young man approached Su Liang and said that he did not need a discount and was going to buy this villa. However, at this time other people entered the room and said that the villa had already been sold and the guy should not even dream about it. Mao Jie recognized one of them as the leader of the Lingdong sect, Zhou Chenglong. The monk announced that his master was already interested in purchasing the villa and the price had already been set, meaning that it had already been sold. The green-eyed boy responded by stating that they should have first found out who they were dealing with before speaking to him like that. Su Liang bowed and expressed her willingness to find a more suitable villa with a better location and a better price. The stranger repeated that he wanted this particular villa and did not understand why his words were not being taken into account. Yichio claimed that he didn't care who he was, the villa belonged to him, and further discussion was pointless, so the guy should leave. The boy warned Yichio not to test his patience, otherwise the consequences would be unpleasant and he would regret it. The red-haired guy suggested that the guy leave now, otherwise he would have to ask the green-eyed guy for forgiveness. The blue-haired man smiled and suggested that they relax, sit down, and talk. The green-eyed guy said that if Yichio didn't sell him the villa, his company would go under, and he would forbid him from trading, and he wouldn't let anyone live here. Su Liang announced that Yichio had heard his words, and if he didn't sell the villa to this guy, his business would be doomed, but if the protagonist agreed to give in, he would get 2 villas. The protagonist suggested that they compete for the villa, and Bai Meng agreed. The young man asked the green-eyed boy to determine the rules of the competition, and at that moment, a man approached Bai Meng and whispered something in his ear. Bai Meng smiled back and assured the man that he would not lose this bet, and the villa would be his. The green-eyed guy offered to play them a straight flush, announcing that he had 5 chips for each of them, and the one who captured all the chips would win. The red-haired boy agreed, and they began playing together with Bai Meng. They were dealt cards, and the protagonist threw the chips on the table, announcing that it would soon become clear who would win. The green-eyed boy began to think, knowing that Ichio only had 1 chip left, while he had several, and if he couldn't defend himself now, he would lose. Ichio stopped the game, announcing that they were laying out their cards, and the protagonist apologized but announced that he had 1, which caused Bai Meng to become displeased. The blue-eyed man explained that Bai Meng had lost his last chip to Yi Qiu using a few small cards. The main character declared that the villa now belonged to him, which surprised the green-eyed guy very much. Bai Meng pointed at Director Su and announced that he would admit defeat, but the villa would not go to Yi Qiu and he would forbid him from selling it. The red-haired boy noticed that Bai Meng's behavior was more like accepting defeat and trying to win through deceit. The green-eyed guy stated that he was not competing with Ichio and did not care what happened to him, and he only advised Su Liang to sell the villa to the protagonist to avoid potential problems. He added, however, that Su Liang should think carefully about his decision, because mistakes in such situations could be costly. The young man said that if he was deceived, he would not forgive it. The powerful guy warned that if Yi Qiu didn't know who he was, he'd better find out quickly so he could know who was behind his actions. Yi Qiu replied that Bai Meng was only trying to intimidate him, but he himself was nothing special, and he believed that his family gave him free rein to act in this city. Bai Meng warned that they had better listen to his advice, otherwise the consequences could be very frightening. The protagonist got tired of words and demanded that Bai Meng show how terrible his actions would be.